If I can just establish the firm connection with members of the committee, please, for the purposes of our meeting. The Chair, Councillor O'Brien, are you linked up?
I'm here and I can hear you, but not that clearly, Peter. You are a little bit faint.
Okay, is that a bit better?
That's better.
Yeah. Councillor Christine Banks?
Yes, Peter.
Councillor Sarah Doyle?
Yes, thank you, Peter.
Councillor Joe Dunn is on the call as a ward councillor. Councillor Malcolm Kennedy.
Loud and clear, Peter.
Councillor Billy Marrat.
All good, Peter.
Thank you, Billy. Councillor John Prince.
Yes, thank you, Peter.
Councillor Nick Small is on the call, I think, as a ward councillor.
Yes, I'm here.
Thank you. I think I've covered all the elected members. And Councillor Juarez, I beg your pardon.
Yes, I'm here. Good morning, everybody.
Covers the members of the committee, Chair. Basically, in terms of the procedure to be followed, as we get to the actual...
Peter, I'll be sitting as the councillor on planning.
Yes. Are you actually the member of the committee?
Yeah, I'll be the member of the committee today. Joe's going to be submitting as a ward member.
Billy Marrat's also.
And Billy Lake as well.
Billy Lake, rather. Okay, thanks for that. Yes, as we get to the actual applications themselves, the respective interested parties will be asked to link onto the meeting. During the remainder of the meeting, if I could ask our guests to remain off camera and muted until they're called in. Similarly with members of the committee, if you could stay on mute, which enhances the audio quality. If you need to raise questions, please use the virtual hand or indicate by waving a real hand to either myself or the chair, and we'll ensure that you're picked up in that case. Chair, if we could take the actual agenda itself, can I ask members if there are any declarations of interests which they need to declare this morning? Councillor Prince?
Yes, I want to declare an interest in item 9 on Tynwald Hill. I've had extensive discussions with members of the public, so therefore I'll take no part in this item, nor will I vote on it.
Who's closing down discussions on Tynwald Hill?
Councillor Juarez.
Yes, I'd like to declare an interest in item 13. That I had dealings with the premises management assets, and this was because as a ward councillor, I was getting plenty of complaints regarding the state of the parade at 510 Mather Avenue, where a lot of the units were boarded up. So I liaised to find out what was going on with those units, you know, what the council was going to do about it. And so I did liaise with premises management unit to ensure that they were advertising the units correctly and that they were moving along with trying to find tenants for those units.
Be taking part in the application?
Yes.
Yes, thank you. Councillor Radford.
I will be speaking as a ward member, but not as a planning member on 43 Tynwald Hill. I thought Councillor Prince's role was to close down discussions on the issue, not have discussions.
You'll be taking part in the actual consideration, Councillor Radford?
Yes.
Yeah, thank you. Thank you, Chair. There seems to be the declarations.
Peter,
yes.
I also need to bring to your attention, maybe she can't get in, that Councillor Sarah Doyle is expressing an interest on Mill and Park Streets. So that would be item 12, and she wants to speak. Oh, Sarah, would you like to come in yourself?
Yeah.
Yes, thank you, Chair. Declaring an interest in item 12, and I'm happy to abstain from discussion and on the vote. Local councillors have submitted concerns about this application, and as one of the local councillors for the wards, I have discussed this application in depth with various community stakeholders, so I think I will be abstaining. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Doyle. In that case, Chair, that takes you to the minutes of your last meetings of the 16th and the 23rd of February, if they can be considered as a correct record.
I'm agreeable to them. Somebody else needs to be.
Agree.
Thank you, Councillor Doyle.
No objections to those minutes, colleagues? Thank you. What's this? There are no urgent items of business, Chair. Which takes us to item number 4 on the agenda this morning, which is number 47 to 55 Smithdown Lane, Liverpool 7. And we do have Kath Wallace, who is representing the applicants from Council Adult Services, and Councillor Nick Small, Ward Councillor, wishing to address you this morning, Chair. There is also a presentation, you understand. Thank you, Chair.
Yes, so can we proceed with the presentation now? So Kath Wallace, I'm inviting you to comment, if you wish.
Yes, thank you, Chair, and thank you for the opportunity to present to Planning Committee today. This is a application for the change of use for 47 to 55 Smithdown Lane, which is currently a student accommodation block, and it is for change of use for short-term accommodation for single homeless people who've got a risk of rough sleeping. And we could go to the next slide, please. So just to give a little bit of background first on the application and the reasons for it before we go into the proposal itself. I'm sure committee members will be aware that we've got a very strong track record of addressing rough sleeping within Liverpool, and particularly taking a partnership approach to that across various sectors. We've got strong support from the police, from the voluntary and charitable sector, and all of those sectors have been closely involved in the development of the proposals today. We also have a legal duty to address rough sleeping under the Homeless Reduction Act, and we also have the commitment within the city plan to tackle rough sleeping. It's been a long time ambition of the council to end rough sleeping. And to that end, we've got a long track record of innovation, and we were the first city to open a shared night centre in Liverpool, which was Library House, which was on Hampton Street. That operated from 2017. Unfortunately, due to COVID, that was a shared sleeping space, so clearly was not going to be COVID compliant. So it was closed in March 2020, and those service users were removed at that time into emergency hotels that the council secured. However, government has indicated that there cannot be a return to that model of shared sleeping spaces. And clearly, with COVID likely to be with us for some time, they are not going to be compliant, nor is it really given the best quality of life for service users. Therefore, we need to put more permanent arrangements in place. We can't contain the use of using hotels. And therefore this proposal is to put a permanent arrangement in place to provide that first step from the street solution. And this scheme is it is a small part of a much wider proposal around transforming homelessness services, which has been agreed by Cabinet, known as the Liverpool Ladder, which is to really longer term, we want to move away from needing first step from the street type services and have a much greater focus on prevention and a much greater focus on securing long-term accommodation and rehousing people permanently. However, that's a longer transformation plan. Thank you. Next slide. So just to confirm, the proposal is to change the use of the building from student accommodation to short-term temporary accommodation for people at risk of rough sleeping. This includes carrying out minor works to the building, which includes upgrading the internal CCTV and putting access control in throughout the building, and to convert the building is currently 65 bedrooms. The proposal is to reduce this to 59 bed spaces and to convert those rooms to create interview rooms, staff office, staff area and laundry for service users. And we'd also improve the entrance to the building. And it also includes improving external CCTV and the erection of site fencing at the back of the building to improve the integrated secure access. The proposal also includes the installation of an external smoking shelter so we can manage smoking on site. In terms of the actual operation of the service will be delivered by our partner, the Whitechapel Centre, which I'm sure committee members will be familiar with. They're a very, very experienced agency within this sphere, and the site will be staffed 24 hours a day. It will not be a direct access service, therefore service users will not be able to self-present to the building. All service users will be assessed off-site before it's determined that they are suitable for this building. It's also important to realise that there is sufficient staff on site to ensure that both service users are supported within the building, and also can ensure that all the operation of the external is managed as well, and parking is also included as part of the site. I think the next slide. So that's just the final slide, which confirms the site and the side elevation of the building. Thank you.
Trish, you're still muted.
So does that conclude your presentation, Marrat?
Sorry, Chair, I didn't catch that.
Does that conclude your presentation?
Yes, it does.
Right,
Thank you.
so I'm inviting any questions from committee members now. I don't see anybody indicating. So I'm going to pass on now. We've got 2 ward councillors present here today who wish to speak. I think both of them are in favour of this application. I'm going to invite Councillor Nick Small, followed by Councillor Christine Banks.
Thanks, Chair. I wanted to attend today to speak in favour of this, because I think it's important that councillors come and support things like this when we're in favour of them, not just when we're against things, as is often the case at the planning committee. We've supported over the years many different interventions that the council has done around homelessness, including Labray House. Because of the ward that we represent, covering most of the city centre, we see firsthand some of the issues around homelessness. We see it very in rough sleeping. We see it very clearly on the streets around the city centre, and we see the impact that this can have with residents and with businesses. And what we've always tried to do is work in a constructive way with the City Council, with partners like Whitechapel, and with residents and with businesses to support interventions like this, and that support people who've experienced homelessness, but also make the issues that residents and local businesses face and mitigate some of those issues. And I think the city's done that very successfully over the past few years, particularly with Labray House. I was very disappointed that Labray House had to close. It was no fault of the City Council. It was because of COVID and the pandemic, and the need to be able to support people in a way that they could socially distance, in a way that they could be safe. Over the past year, since Labray House has closed, and the council paid to house people in hotels and apart hotels across the city centre, which has worked well. But what we really need is a dedicated facility, a dedicated space, to support some of our most vulnerable fellow citizens. And I believe that that this does this. I think Smithdown Court is a very good location. It's largely away from neighbouring residents. The route that people are going to take from the city is largely away from residential areas, and will minimise the impact that residents and businesses face through this. So I think it is a good location. The other aspect of this that I do strongly support is that this is a permanent planning permission for a permanent facility. I think this is important. And what we've seen over the years is lots of different temporary interventions in there that have maybe had planning permission for a couple of years, and then we've had to look, and we've had to look somewhere else. That causes issues when you're looking for different sites in the city. It causes issues with residents and businesses because of the uncertainty of that. And having this as a permanent facility in what is a good location, I think, is the way forward, and I strongly support this. Finally, Chair, I just want to say about some of the work that we've done with local residents on this. As councillors and Councillor Banks is here today as well, who can confirm some of this. We had a meeting with residents from Central Ward and also from Picton Ward a couple of months ago to explain what this was about, to deal with any issues. There weren't really any issues there. We've been working with some of the students. This is student accommodation, and there were and still are some students who are living in Smithdown Court, and that's been quite a constructive process, where students have been given and made an offer to be rehoused somewhere else. Some of the students have taken them up on that offer and have moved out and have moved away and have been compensated for that and have had a package of support in there. There's still some students in there. The assurances that we've been given and they've been given is that their tenancies are protected till the end of June, and it's a decision for them whether they want to move out voluntarily. But I think they are protected, and I think their interests are really well served as part of this. So I'd like to place on record my thanks to Kath and her team and the Whitechapel for the work that they've done with the student tenants in there. It has been quite difficult and unsettling for some of those who've been quite worried about the future, but I think that has been dealt with really well. So I hope that the committee can support this application today. I think it is a really progressive way, and Liverpool's leading the way on how we support people who've experienced homelessness across the city. We all should be proud of the record that the city has got on this and how we're taking this forward as a city with Smithdown Court.
Thank you, Councillor Small. I'd like to invite in now Councillor Christine Banks to speak, and then I'll take any questions for them if there are any. Christine, would you like to unmute and speak to the committee? You need to unmute, Christine.
Councillor Banks, I think you're on mute.
Maybe Brian needs to unmute her, Peter.
I can do that, Chair. Let me find it.
Christine, we're inviting you to address the committee. That's it. We can hear you now. No, we can't hear you again.
Okay, thank you for that. Good morning, Chair and committee. Thank you for allowing me to speak this morning. Councillor Small has said quite a lot there, but as you know, and as the committee know, we've been working with the homeless. I think I can go back 8 years, where we in Central Ward look at opening a couple of dry centres which took them off the street during the day, street drinkers. We have worked with local residents, we've worked with students. I think you can put on record that as the Central Ward councillors, we've done a hell of a lot with supporting the homeless in this city. We supported Labrador House, and as you are well aware, we had to close Labrador House down because of the pandemic and because they was all in one room. Because the homeless people, I think the homeless deserve to live, especially in
Christine is frozen now. Can Brian help us out with this?
It's Brian. I suspect it's the broadband link to Councillor Banks's home, but we'll continue. It's come back now, so we'll continue.
Yeah, carry on, please, Christine. You froze for a bit.
Yeah, I hope you got all that. As I said, we've worked for the past 8 years with many residents groups. We worked with the students, and we've supported the homeless. So I support this application because, as I said, I think the homeless need somewhere which is their own space, which we can work with them and then get them back into society and move them on to help them achieve that. So I'm in support of this. Worked with the Whitechapel, they're doing a hell of a good job, and we will continue to work and support this project and I hope that the councillors this morning support us and allow this application to go forward. Thank you, Chair. Thank you, Committee.
Yeah, thank you, Christine and Nick. And I think they explained some of this stuff's in our notes, but they've explained a bit more that the students are being sorted out, shall I say, because there were some concerns expressed by the building students, and also how important it is to support our homeless, and the fact that the councillors themselves have carried out a public consultation, which is very praiseworthy. Are there any questions? Councillor Juarez.
Thank you, Chair. Well, I think this is a very good initiative by the City Council to treat our homeless people with respect. To treat our homeless people with respect by allowing them to have their own space. So I do understand, you know, the need that, you know, each homeless person will have their own facilities. But can I just ask, how long will this initiative go on for? Is it a year, 2 years, 3 years? What's the plan with the owners of that building?
Well, it does say this is a permanent permission as far as we're concerned, but Councillor Banks has indicated, so I'll let her come in, followed by Councillor Kennedy. Councillor Banks first.
Yes, Chair, you're right. This is ongoing. And we're hoping that if this is successful and we do help the owners get back into society and give their own space, maybe we could we could get people off the street, especially when it's harsh winters, and especially when and there's a lot of young people out there and they need our help, and we need to help them with respect and dignity. So I think Councillor Juarez, yes, this is an ongoing. This is not just for the year. Joe Dunn, can you turn your mic off?
Thank you, Councillor Banks. Can I invite Councillor Kennedy now to speak?
Right, thank you, Chair. At this stage, I'm not sure who we're asking questions of, whether we're asking questions of the witnesses or we're asking questions of the
two councillors.
Right. Okay. Well, I'll ask the question to the councillors. I mean, looking at the proposal, and especially as it's a permanent facility, it seems to me that this is a serious attempt to deal with a very serious problem. There's only one kind of objection, and I'm not sure where those objections went to, and that was from the students. And I know that as local councillors, you've also worked very closely with students as well, and their tenancies naturally end at a certain time, but they possibly would have had the expectation that they would be able to renew those tenancies. So where have those objections gone? Is there any assistance being given, or is it just being left to the university to sort the problem out?
It's a private halls of residence, Chair. So it's not a university halls of residence. We have been working very closely with Liverpool Student Homes, which is the accommodation arm of the three universities. We've also been working very closely with the Guild of Students and Liverpool Students' Union on this. As I understand it, the existing student tenants had a tenancy in place until the end of June. Legally, that tenancy couldn't end, but there's been negotiations. If the students have wanted to get out of that tenancy, they've been able to do so, and there's been a package available for them to do that. So we've held about 3 or 4 meetings with the student tenants and with a lot of the parents to try and broker that arrangement with the operator, so that students have got choices. They've got that. From our perspective as councillors, and these are our constituents as well. We're confident that they've being dealt with in a fair way, that they've got choices. No one's being forced to do anything on that. And I think Kath and her team have been part of that, and I think have acted in a very in a very responsible way, and have gone sort of above and beyond what they've been legally required to in that. What we've also tried to do is to reduce, when you're talking here about people who are 19, 20, 21, who've obviously been very worried about this. You've obviously got a lot of change going on with the pandemic anyway. So, a lot of the students have been really worried about, the future on that. So we've been trying to work with them to try to, to reduce the worry that they've had. And I think, the Kath and her team have done a really good job in trying to reduce that, and trying to put the students in a good position on that. I've had a conversation today with the project manager on this, just to find out the latest position before I spoke here today. And again, these are our constituents, and I think that this is, a good deal for them. And I think this is the right way forward for the city. And I wouldn't be here today speaking in favour of this if I thought my constituents weren't getting treated fairly, and we weren't doing our best for people who've experienced homelessness across the city.
Councillor Small, I think you've made that clear. It's also been pointed out in the notes, and we may have the case officer having a little bit extra to say. I don't know yet till I invite the case officer in. Councillor Banks, are you happy with that, or do you want to come back?
No, I'm happy with that. I'm here to support homeless people. And first and last.
All right. So I'm now going to ask our case officer to come in and summarise on the issues. So it's Fergal McAvoy, over to you.
Good morning, Chair, and good morning, members. Thank you for that. You've got a detailed report in front of you today, and you've also listened to detailed comments both from Kath Wallace and Adult Social Care and two Central Ward councillors. Chair, you'll recollect this application was originally in front of you on the Planning Committee of 16 February last, where initially your officers recommended a temporary approval for 5 years. Since then, it became apparent that that application was withdrawn from the agenda when it became apparent that Ministry for Housing, Community and Local Government, who are part funding this project to the tune of £2.2 million, would only grant funded on the basis that a permanent planning permission was granted. The report has been taken away and has been rewritten on that basis. In relation to the issues that Councillor Kennedy's raised and members have answered, I would stress that no works on this premises will commence other than minor ground floor internal alterations until the end of June, when all the students have vacated the premises. So it wouldn't be a case of work would commence on the building when a number of building students were in situ. And I would also say, and Councillor Small has elaborated on this quite more, we held off on bringing this application to you until the issues of the kind of rehousing or relocation of the existing students had been addressed. And as you can see, there was initial number of concerns raised from students and student representatives in relation to the application. All those matters have subsequently been addressed. You'll have seen from the images that the premises, it's an existing Part 5, Part 3-storey student accommodation, which currently accommodates 64 students. The proposal is to convert it into 59 bedrooms to accommodate homeless people who would have, they would be assessed elsewhere and then chosen, if they were suitable, to live in this premises. As I say, all of the bedrooms would be en suite except one, and would be kind of communal kitchen and dining facilities on each floor. There are minimal alterations proposed to the existing building. There's a new doorway, there's grills being placed on all the ground floor windows, and there's also 2.4 metre fencing proposed in the rear car park to sever the curtilage of the car park from the shared student accommodation car park elsewhere. You've got a detailed report in front of you where issues relating to the principle of development, the design and character of the scheme, the impact on neighbouring properties, highways and inclusive design issues all have been raised, identified and assessed fully by your officer, Chair. So unless members or yourself have any further queries about the contents of the report, just move to the recommendation, which is to grant for permanent planning approval subject to the stated conditions and together with a section 106 legal agreement.
I don't have anybody indicating that they have a question. So in that case, I will move to the vote. Can I move that the recommendation be approved? Is that agreed?
Thank you, Chair. Can I just go through the members? Chair, are you in favour?
Agreed.
Councillor Kennedy?
Agreed.
Thank you. Councillor Prince?
Agreed.
Councillor Doyle?
Agreed, thank you.
Councillor Marrat? Thank you. Councillor Radford?
Agreed.
Thank you. And Councillor Juarez?
Agreed.
Thank you, Chair. That's unanimous. 7 members of the committee voting in favour of the application, which is agreed. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you, Chair. Thank you, committee.
Thank you, councillors, for coming along today. So we're moving on now to agenda item 5, which is 94 Rose Lane, Liverpool 18. And I want to invite Jonathan Smith now. I believe you're going to lead us through the presentation, Jonathan, yes?
Good morning, Chair. Good morning, members of the committee.
Good morning.
I wasn't aware there was a presentation.
Oh, well, because I've got conflicting accounts. I thought the case officer was going to do the presentation, Stuart. But then it says on my notes that I got last night that you were going to be presenting, Jonathan. So
I was asked to,
are you just
I don't mind.
questions, or do you want to address the committee?
I'm fine to answer questions or present.
Well, shall we invite our case officer to come in, and then if you want to make a comment at the end of the presentation, you may.
Great.
And I'll invite some questions. Stuart, would you like to
Thank
come in?
Thank you, Chair. Stuart Clark, team leader of the South team. You've got a detailed report in front of you, and the plans will be on screen to assist you in assessing the application. This is 94 Rose Lane. The proposal is to erect a 2-storey extension to the existing dental surgery so as to provide additional lab space, but retaining all existing car parking through the utilisation of an undercroft construction solution. It's located in a primarily residential area, and the proposed extension is of an appropriate design so as not to have any detrimental impact on the street scene. Nearby occupiers will not be affected by the extension, and any issues of possible overlooking at the nearest property will be overcome by the use of obscure glazing where the extension comes closer than the existing rear building line of the surgery itself. The only objections raised all relate to parking and vehicular movements. The scheme has been carefully considered by the Head of Highways and Transportation, who has raised no objections to the proposal. The proposal will not result in any additional consulting rooms, and therefore there will be no additional patient trips over and above that which already exist. The Head of Highways and Transportation considers that any additional trips associated with the additional lab space will be minimal, but the applicant has advised that there will be no additional staff over and above that which currently use the premises. Given that there will be no reduction in off-street parking from the existing 12 spaces, it is not considered that the proposal would make the existing situation relating to parking and vehicular movement in and around the site any worse than the current situation. Works have commenced on the proposed extension but have ceased, and whilst the commencement of works without consent is not condoned, it does not constitute a reason to refuse the application. Conditions are proposed requiring the submission of a construction management plan to minimise disturbance to residents, and that the new extension is not occupied until the car park is fully brought back into use. And therefore, Chair, we're happy to recommend approval of the application, but happy to answer any questions should you wish to.
So are there any questions either for Jonathan Smith, who is here on behalf of the agent, or for our case officer? Okay, well, I don't see anybody indicating. All the members of the committee, of course, have read their notes, so I'm going to move to the recommendation. Can I move that the recommendation be approved? Is that agreed?
Thank you, Chair. Your vote?
Agreed.
Councillor Kennedy?
Agreed.
Thank you. Councillor Prince?
Agreed.
Councillor Doyle?
Agreed.
Thank you. Councillor Marrat?
Agreed.
Councillor Radford?
Agreed.
Thank you. And Councillor Juarez?
Agreed.
Thank you. Chair, that has been agreed unanimously. 7 members of the committee voting in favour and none against.
So now we move on to item 6, which is 425 West Derby Road, Liverpool 6. This is a retrospective application. We have Andy McMullen here, who I believe is here to answer questions. So I'm going to hand over to our case officer to lead us through the presentation.
Good morning, Chair, members of the Planning Committee. Hope everybody can hear and see me. My name is John Hayes. I am the team leader for development management in the north of the city. Chair, you've got a very detailed report in front of you, but I think it's probably worth just highlighting some of the issues which necessitates this particular matter being referred back to you. You'll see from the report, Chair, that this originally went to Planning Committee some time ago. It was recommended for approval subject to the grant of a Section 106 agreement. That Section 106 agreement was never signed, but the developer continued on the assumption that the planning permission was in place and has largely completed the development. So this is an application now to retain what's been done, obviously without planning permission, but is clearly very, very similar to that members previously saw when it was first brought to their attention. The report, Chair, sets out those changes and they're set out in the proposal part of your agenda and the report. And it includes the retention of the 13 flats, together with various other works, which include a part extension at the rear. Chair, again, you'll see from the report that there has been some significant discussion around this particular application during the course of the application while it's being considered. And officers have expressed concern around a number of the elements that have been implemented as part of that application. We have managed to negotiate successfully with the applicant and their agents on quite a number of the elements that are proposed, such that the scheme is now to revert back largely to the scheme that members originally saw, and there are various conditions attached to ensure that those works that have been agreed will be implemented within a suitable timescale. I'm happy to go through those details. That's one, that picture that you've now got on screen is one area, for example, that we do have concerns, and again is mentioned in the report. Clearly, the painting of that breeze block extension is not in keeping with the surrounding property, but nonetheless, it is seen from largely from the rear. It has limited public views, but again, this is an area that the applicant has agreed will be amended to more closely reflect the host building and the adjacent properties. So that's just one example of a number that are set out in your report where officers have negotiated a successful outcome. Chair, the other issues around the suitability of the property for conversion, the impact on neighbouring residential amenity, highways matters and so on, are all dealt with within the committee report, and were obviously dealt with through the original report to this planning committee. You'll see, Chair, that there are again requirements insofar as the Section 106 is concerned, so a full Section 106 contribution in relation to the proposal. And then finally, Chair, there is an additional update note which amends a number of the conditions that are currently on your agenda papers. They're just trying to tidy up some of the conditions and make them a little bit tighter. Happy to answer any detailed questions that you and or members of the Planning Committee may have.
I'm inviting questions now, either for our case officer or for Andy McMullen, who is present. So I can see there's a hand up, but I think you're going to have to help me out, Peter, because I don't know who's got their hand up.
Yeah, Chair. I've got Councillor John Prince and Councillor Joe Dunn seeking to speak. Yeah.
Councillor Prince, followed by Councillor Dunn.
Thanks, Chair. I just want to highlight item covered in paragraph 4.3, which tells us that some of these flats are too small, below the minimum set size. And also on paragraph 5.2, which says they don't all fulfil the accessibility criteria. I know this has been done, and we kind of have our hands tied on the decision, but I just think we could have tried harder to make them the right size, etc.
Would you like to come back in now, John, on that one? And Andy can as well if he wants to.
Absolutely, Chair. Thank you for that. The issue is the same as the previous consideration of this application, and it largely relates to the weight that you and officers can give to the various policies that are set out in the draft local plan. As you'll see from the report, we can only at this stage offer minimum weight to that particular policy around minimum technical standards and accessibility. They're all part of the same policy. And for those reasons, Chair, we're not yet in a strong enough position to push back or refuse the application on those grounds. Clearly, at the point where the local plan is formally adopted, then those policies will carry statutory weight and decisions will be made rather in accordance with those particular policies. But at this stage, unfortunately, they don't attach sufficient weight.
An old buildings there as well, don't we? So can I invite, I think it's Councillor Steve Bradford to come in.
Yeah, Chairman, I'm a bit concerned about this. It's almost like builders done what they want to do, and then we're going to rubber stamp something which we think is already substandard. I mean, I can't comprehend why we have guidelines, and every time they come up at a committee, we're told, well, they're not that worthwhile having, so we're going to ignore them. But going back to the original planning application, I'll put on record, I was disappointed. The applicant had actually asked to have on the ground floor offices that could be used for multi-purpose business hubs. Now, that was before COVID. Nowadays, we know we want to encourage home working and small retail units. I mean, it begs the question why we can't see a reversion back to office space on the ground floor. But I'm really bothered about this concept that we now have substandard flats that we're just going to rubber stamp because they've been done anyway. Really uncomfortable. It has been a brave development by the builders. I don't know why this is all coming up to the committee now, that we're being expected to put a gun to our head and say, well, we've got to prove it's been done anyway. I think planning should have been more flexible at the original outset and had the office space on the ground floor, which would add to employment prospects in the area. And maybe then we wouldn't be need to having substandard flats. So I'm really uncomfortable about the whole scenario, not what's being done, but the way it's being done.
Would you like to come in now, Andy McMullen?
Chair, you've got Councillor Dunn also. He was indicating.
I'd like Andy McMullen. Yeah. I'd like Andy McMullen to get a chance to comment now on what Councillor Radford said. Then I'll bring in Councillor Dunn.
I think it was Councillor Radford on Councillor Dunn's link, Chair.
That's correct, Peter. It's Brian here.
That, yeah. Andy, would you like to come in?
Yeah, sure. just to clarify in terms of the just without going into too much detail, the history. Obviously it went to committee, as John said, in the autumn of 2017. My client signed the Section 106, and then the funder signed the Section 106. But from the Section 106 going back to the council to for it to be completed by the city council, the funder went into administration, and they didn't pay the fees for the Section 106 to be completed and sealed. So naively, my client thought that the actual permission had been granted. Because obviously he'd done his bit, the funder had done his bit, and he wasn't aware that the fees had been paid. At the time that the original application, this application went to committee originally, they were obviously dealing with, as John said, a different space standards. In terms of the accommodation that has been provided, I can't really comment on the commercial at ground floor element as to why that wasn't progressed as part of the proposal, because I know it was originally on the table. All of the ground floor units are well in excess of the space standards that are obviously proposed for inclusion in the new local plan. The rest, so the upper floors, the first floor and the second floor, there's 5 units per floor, which gives the total of 13. The majority of them are only very marginally, if you want to call them, short of the standards which are proposed for adoption. There's just two units on each floor that are kind of below standards. And the problem the applicant's got is because he thought that the permission obviously being granted, he's progressed with the works and the scheme is kind of 95% complete. I don't know if you've got any of the internal pictures there that you can share, but and it's a very unfortunate situation. I don't think doing what they want, it's not a case of that in this instance. It's very much circumstances by virtue of the funder going into administration that the client is kind of faced with this unfortunate situation.
So inviting in, I think, either Councillor Dunn or Councillor Radford, because they're coming off the same internet connection. So if you'd like to speak.
Yes, Chair, I'm absolutely confused. Why would the developer believe the amended plans had been agreed for him to be confused with? Does it mean planning have given a consent without coming to committee or without any public consultation? And actually that bothers me. I mean, actually, I've got a lot of sympathy for the developer because it's been an incredibly difficult site and a very old building, which has taken a big investment. So let's be absolutely upfront. My sympathies are with the developer on this one, but I don't understand how the developer's been confused and who's confusing him that the amended plans were agreed or not. Because does that mean there's private discussions with board members aren't party to with planning and a green light's been given, which I think is making me feel incredibly uncomfortable. I think the right thing's being done. It's an incredibly difficult historic building to develop, but I'm getting alarm bells when a developer's saying our developer thought the amended plans have been approved. Why would they?
I'm going to invite our case officer to come in here because this seems to be causing confusion and I need the case officer to cast some light.
Chair, I'm not sure I understand Councillor Radford's particular issue here, and apologies for that. But the issue, the confusion hasn't arisen around the scheme itself. The issue has arisen around the signing or not of the Section 106 agreement. And as you've heard from the agent Andy McMullen, the reason that has occurred is because the funder was a signatory to that Section 106 agreement. It was signed by the developer in part, but there was also then a further requirement to, I think, to pay some additional fees. And so the Section 106 agreement was never formally signed off. The developer has then gone away in the absence of his funder, but assumed that the Section 106 had been signed, and then obviously that then releases the planning permission and has progressed accordingly. So it's an unfortunate set of circumstances, but it's not to do with officers within the council. It's to do with a confusion, a breakdown of communication, by the sound of it, between the funder and the applicant themselves. The plans that you are now being asked to consider are almost identical to the permission, the resolution that was given back in 2017. So the scheme is exactly the same. So in relation to the offices, again, at ground floor that Councillor Radford has alluded to, they weren't part of the original scheme either. There's been no fundamental change. The changes that have been made are in terms of implementing what this committee saw back in 2017, albeit that there are some elements that are different to that, and we have sought to make those changes through the course of this planning application. And the applicant and their agent have been very supportive in trying to agree those changes to the best of their ability. So there's changes to the windows, and as I say, that they're all listed within the committee report, so that you're able to fully understand the difference between what you saw back in 2017 and what you're being asked to consider now. Happy to answer any further questions, Chair.
Are there any further questions? All right, well, I'm going to move to the vote then. Can I move that the recommendation as amended be approved? Is that agreed?
Thank you, Chair. Your vote?
Agreed.
Councillor Kennedy?
Agreed.
Councillor Prince?
Abstention.
Abstention. Councillor Sarah Doyle?
Agreed.
Thank you. Councillor Billy Marrat?
Agreed.
Thank you. Councillor Radford?
Agreed.
Thank you. And Councillor Juarez?
Abstaining.
Chair, the committee have determined to approve the application, 5 votes in favour, none against and 2 abstentions. Thank you. That takes you on, Chair, to item number 7, which relates to vacant land adjacent to the Church of the Latter-day Saints at Millbank. Over to you. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you. And on this one, I think we are going to have Alan Ravenhill coming in. Alan, is that correct that you want to present this to us?
Yes, can you hear me?
Yes, I can, loud and clear.
Great.
So to you.
Hi, I did submit some drawings for display as well at the same time. Are they available?
Well, the plan is up.
That's great, I've got them now.
And now the drawings are up, yes.
Okay. This brownfield site, formerly used as a council depot, originally contained a large house and associated outbuildings. It has now been derelict for a number of years, becoming overgrown and the target of illegal fly tipping. This application proposes a new housing development for the site comprising 8 1- and 2-bedroomed apartments, together with 4 3-bed, 5-person semi-detached houses located towards the rear of the site. With the proposed mixed tenure of affordable rent and shared ownership houses, this new aspirational mixed development aims to target the existing and future housing needs of the area. Designed to meet national described space standards, all apartments achieve a minimum M42 accessible and adaptable standard, and 2 of the ground floor apartments achieve M43 wheelchair user standard. Access to all levels is via 2 communal stairways and future lift provision. The new development will be ecologically enhanced with high levels of insulation, electric heating, solar panels and car charging points to reduce bills. The new development will create an active street frontage responsive to the local vernacular and general surroundings. Utilising a palette of traditional materials, the main building has been designed to step down, accommodating the sloping nature of the site and mitigating building mass when fronting onto Millbank, as agreed with the planning officer. Elevations facing onto Bankfield Park are designed with primary importance to ensure that they are complementary, creating a sympathetic but robust edge to the park, softened by existing mature trees which run along the edge of the boundary wall. The houses frame the view upon entry and meet the council's interface requirements, and furthermore, the apartments overlooking will give greater security to the park. The existing boundary wall shared with the park has been shown retained. Visually, the wall appears in very poor condition. It will be comprehensively surveyed to assess its structural stability. Improved access off Millbank has been designed to highways adoptable standards. The access road to apartments and houses will be unadopted and in private ownership, maintained by the Housing Association. Externally, all houses benefit from private gardens within curtilage parking at the front. Parking provision for both the apartments and houses are in accordance with planning requirements as outlined in Planning Guidance Note 8, and there is a reduction from the existing planning approval. Supplementary to providing much needed high quality homes within the area, Regenda will also initiate comprehensive construction training and apprenticeship programme that will offer opportunities to the local community. Like many brownfield sites, there have been viability challenges, but at the same time, Regenda has allowed for a Section 106 to be entered into to ensure that as a developer, they continue their support and investment in the community. Finally, should the approval be given, Regenda are in a strong position to deliver the development, utilising its in-house building company, M&Y. By building more homes in partnership with their own contractor, the risk of contractor liquidation we've seen on many other developments recently is removed. This considered managed approach demonstrates Regenda's commitment to investing in people, as well as providing high quality, affordable housing. That's the end of the presentation.
Helen. And I have somebody indicating. Peter, can you tell me who it is? Oh, Councillor Joe Dunn, I know, is going to be speaking in a minute. Are there any other questions, though, for the agent? All right, so we now have Councillor Joe Dunn, who is entitled to address the committee for up to 3 minutes, and I believe you're objecting, Councillor Dunn.
Actually, it's Steve Radford just using his computer.
Oh, so you're going to be speaking, Steve?
I'm not going to speak. I'm just going to ask a question, if I may.
Oh, okay. Carry on.
I'm puzzled by the comments that the development's changed in light of local housing need. And the reason I say that, and I do believe in creating sustainable, balanced communities, is we have high levels of vacancies in communal flat developments like at Breckside Park, like at Moscow Drive, where apartments are being built and the occupancy level is quite low. But as local ward councillors, we know there is a high demand for family homes, and this council, for some reason, has a statement it wants to improve the high quality housing offer. So the original plans for family homes on the site would be in keeping with our council's aspirations. So why are we now dumbing down to create an excess of properties? And I'm going to be honest, looking long term, we had a council policy of spending millions of taxpayers' money to demolish terrace housing because there was an excess supply of terrace housing and it wasn't what people wanted for aspirational housing developments. Are we going to have a council policy in 10 years' time to pull the apartments down? Because we've got an excess of apartments in the area. What we haven't got is a greater demand of family homes. So it looks like we're adding to a surplus demand and not fulfilling our own aspirations of going for higher quality houses. This is a wonderfully, if you look at the properties opposite the development, all the properties are of a high quality family homes on Millbank. If you go to the rear of the properties on Stonycroft, you've got detached and semi-detached housing. So it's not in keeping with the area. That is incredibly misleading. It is out of keeping with the area, and it's dumbing down the development. So I'm not comfortable with the presentation is trying to hoodwink us about the demands of the area, and it's not meeting our council's aspirations to produce a better balanced housing portfolio.
The case officer will obviously be able to summarise the issues about this, Steve, but you do realise, of course, that we have to consider the particular application that's in front of us. It's not part of our deliberations to think whether there are vacancies in other types of housing, but I will hand back to Alan to see if he's got any comment about the demand.
I thought we had an
for that
obligation
type
to
of
create
accommodation.
sustainable
And there's
communities.
somebody who's not muted who we can hear. So I'm handing back to you to see if you want to make any comment, Alan.
Yeah, I just wanted to reiterate that this is a very high quality development designed to meet all the space standards, design standards set, which aren't actually in place yet, the M42, M43 standards. And it is actually being designed as a mixed development, so it does have housing as well as apartments and disabled units. And it is designed to meet the existing and future needs of the clientele that Regenda aim to plan for and provide for. And I'd also like to obviously ask the what the recommendation from the planner is as well.
Okay, now, just to be clear, Councillor Radford, Councillor Dunn doesn't want to take up the slot that I had allocated, no. He doesn't want to speak for 3 minutes.
Joe's got a question here.
Okay.
Hello, thank you, Chair, and good morning.
Good
Committee.
morning.
No, it's basically just reflecting what Steve said. In terms, one of the issues I have got is where it's actually situated. So it's situated on Millbank, and what we currently see is there's a large volume of cars, especially during the rush hour, 9 o'clock, 5 o'clock. And we also have West Derby School there. So at the moment, there's a clear backlog of cars that go straight down to the Mill Lane area. Now, I've seen the photos of the designs and stuff like that. The entrance to cars on that development, it doesn't look wide enough. Can that entrance fit 2 cars, one going up and one going down? And how do you propose them to get out when there's a clear backlog?
Can I respond to that?
Yes, you can, Alan. You come in, and maybe the case officer will also say something later. So over to you, Alan.
Yes, could I just first of all comment that parking numbers have decreased on the development from the previous application. The previous application had 28 parking spaces, and the current development put forward to you has 20 parking spaces. So there's actually about a 25% reduction in what was previously approved. The scheme has actually gone forward towards the highways for comment, and what they've asked us to do, and we have shown within this current layout, is the turning splays as you come out onto Millbank to be increased to current standard, which is currently shown. And yes, 2 cars can pass at that position to allow inward and outward movement.
Thank you for that, Alan. Now, I don't seem to be having any other questions indicated, so I'm going to pass across to our planning officer now to comment, and who can also, I hope, say something about the school, possibly.
Yeah, thank you, Chair. Obviously, you've had a very detailed presentation there and some helpful images for members of the planning committee to more fully understand the scale and the context of this particular application. Chair, it's probably worth me just taking you through the report very quickly, and then I'll come to the 2 points that I think have been raised by members in relation to the application. In terms of the principle of development, you'll see from the report that there is a significant planning history here, and the principle of development is clearly one that is considered acceptable by your officers. The second issue then relates to the design, and obviously that includes elements such as the scale and the footprint and so on. You'll see from the report, Chair, that we have spent some considerable time discussing this application with the architects on behalf of Regenda, and that has been about trying to achieve a scale which your officers consider is more appropriate to its setting. In particular, Councillor Radford has referred to the properties opposite and at the rear, and they are all 2-storey. This is quite an open site at the moment as well. It has very clear views when you're coming down Millbank, and the concern of the officers has been that the original scale and bulk and so on of the development was inappropriate. Clearly, you've also got further along Millbank a much larger structure in the form of the Peter Lloyd Leisure Centre, so it also has to be seen again in that context as well. Suffice to say, Chair, that the architects have worked with your officers to significantly reduce the scale of the building, and you've seen that from the images. One of the points that is important in considering this is the topography of the site and the way it slopes up, and that has allowed for some basement level elements within the scheme. The element closest to Millbank is all at 3-storey, and then obviously as it progresses up the site, it's also 3-storey externally, but you've got that basement level in as well. So the scheme reads largely as a 3-storey development and reflects the topography of the site. Your officers have also worked hard in trying to achieve some detail and design finishes on the external elevations, and again they're all set out within your report. In relation to accessibility and the living conditions of future residents, as you've heard from the agent there, this is in accordance with the technical standards and is all part M42, so that's to be welcome. So part M42 is similar to the old lifetime homes requirement to provide future adaptability if it's needed, so that's to be welcomed. In terms of the impact on nearby residential properties, again the report deals with that, and your officers are satisfied that the interface distances and so on are appropriate and in accordance with your policies. In relation to highway matters, I'm picking up on Councillor Dunn's point. Your officers are satisfied. It's been looked at very carefully by highway officers, and I might bring those in a moment, particularly to deal with Councillor Dunn's point. But it is addressed in the report, and your officers are satisfied both with the level of parking, and you'll see from that that there are 12 spaces proposed for the flats, so it's a deficit of 6, but the houses themselves will have a sufficient amount of parking. They have double driveways in which to provide off-street parking. In relation specifically to the points that Councillor Dunn makes, I'll bring in the highways officer in a moment on that, if I may. The only other issues there for Chair around sort of ecology and trees, we've looked carefully at this. There has been some tree loss on the site, which is unfortunate. But again, through the application process, we have looked to try and provide a quality landscaping scheme within the development to try and offset some of that. And those trees you can see on the plan now to the north of the site are also now protected and should not be adversely affected by this development. The only other thing, Chair, I wish to point out is that whilst Regenda is a registered social landlord, and obviously they sometimes require a reduction in terms of Section 106 because of viability concerns, you'll see from the report that the applicants are willing to contribute a full Section 106 in relation to this particular application. So for all of those reasons, Chair, your officers are happy to recommend approval, and then I'll perhaps bring in Andy Dingwall, if I may, on the highway issue. Just one final point, Chair, and that's in relation to Councillor Radford's concerns about the sustainability of the area and the appropriateness of the accommodation to be provided. As you quite rightly pointed out, Chair, your officers are here to consider, sorry, you as a committee are here to consider, and officers have to consider the application as it's presented to them. There is no reason to think that this would adversely affect the sustainability of the area. Obviously, it provides a mix of accommodation types, and it's important that the city has a range of accommodation types across all parts of the city. And in your officer's view, this will not undermine the sustainability of that area. So that's me done, Chair, and I'll bring in Andy Dingwall, if I may, to deal with that final point. Thank you.
Yes, now, and then I'll invite Councillor Joe Dunn to ask the question. So, Andy?
Andy? Yeah, thanks, Chair. Andy Dingwall, Highway Development Control Team Leader. We've looked carefully at this application, as we do all applications, and just to kind of summarise three points really that have been expressed either by members today or in the objections. Really, the first one is car parking. There's a significant level of car parking for this development. It's 22 residential units, 18 flats and 4 houses. There's 20 car parking spaces across the site. It's an affordable housing development by an affordable housing operator. It's a relatively accessible site. It's got excellent access to public transport with high frequency bus services along there. There's other opportunities to travel as well, walking and cycling. The district centre is a short walk away as well. So we're of the view that the level of car parking that's provided here is entirely appropriate for this development. And I should further add that there's 18 cycle parking spaces, one for each of the flats that are proposed as well, providing opportunities for residents to securely store their bikes. In terms of the vehicular access to the site, just to confirm, I think it's already been mentioned that the width of it is being designed to enable 2 cars to pass one another as one would turn left into the site from Millbank and one would turn left out of the site onto Millbank, without there being any conflict there. So again, we're of the view that the design of the vehicular access is perfectly acceptable. I should further add that there was a point made in the objections in relation to visibility at that access, because at certain times of the day when the school start and finish times are operational, it can get particularly parked up along that section of Millbank. So as part of the off-site highway work that we've identified as being necessary to support this development, we've asked for the introduction of double yellow lines for a length either side of the vehicular access, and that way drivers as they're coming out onto Millbank can look to the right and will have clear visibility of any approaching traffic along that particular stretch of Millbank. There's also the opportunity, whilst it's left in, left out, the access itself, there's a couple of gaps in the central reservation, it's a fairly wide central reservation, to enable vehicles to use to travel in the opposite direction, effectively U-turning, but doing so in a safe manner. So we've got no concerns in that regard either. And the last point I'd want to make is in terms of the vehicular traffic that is likely to be generated by a development of this type. You know, typically for about 22 units, we'd expect in the AM and PM peak periods for that to generate around about a dozen or so, 15 vehicle movements spread across the hour. So when you put that in context, it's probably one extra vehicle added to the network every 4 minutes, every 3 or 4 minutes. So again, in terms of the impact on the operation of the network, we find that acceptable also. So, you know, in summary, we've got no objections, obviously subject to the conditions requiring the provision of double yellow lines at the access. Thanks, Chair.
Thank you, Andy. I'm not going to invite Councillor Joe Dunn to come to him with a question, but there is some background noise again. So can I ask that people mute if they're not actually speaking? Councillor Dunn.
Hi, it's Steve, Chairman. Andy, totally accept your comments.
Okay, Steve, sorry.
No, it's fine. I understand. Andy's comments were quite accurate about the centre of observation cut-throughs on Millbank. Totally comfortable with that. But Andy, you say you carried out observations. Have you actually sat in the traffic trying to get out of Gardeners Road on a Monday, on any morning between 8:30 and 10 o'clock? Getting out of Gardeners Road is almost near impossible, and that's just a bit further down. I'm just wondering where you get this illusion that there's a traffic flow onto Millbank. Since you've imposed the West Derby congestion scheme on us, the backlog up Millbank is worse than ever. And I don't understand how. It's not a question of whether cars can drive. The space is there. There's no space to get out onto West Derby Road, Millbank in the morning for about an hour and a half. That roadway is log jammed. And why would we add to that log jam where people can't get out? But it's one car per hour or two cars per hour. You just can't get out onto the road.
I hope this comment is really relevant to this planning application. But Andy, would you like to
can't get out of the development?
Yeah, I'll come back if that's okay. I mean, I think we're getting into a different territory here. We're kind of starting to consider the merits or otherwise of the pop-up cycle lane that's been introduced on West Derby Road. And just, coming back on that point, I think, given the pandemic and the council's response to the pandemic and the difficulty that people face using alternative means of travel, such as public transport, the government's had a big push to provide better facilities for cyclists. And we've responded to that in a really positive way. We've sought the opportunity to introduce not only a pop-up cycle lane on West Derby Road, but we've got about another half dozen routes across the city that we're looking to introduce also. And we've got to provide alternatives for people to be able to travel about the city when they're able to do so, and do so safely, I might add. So that's my view on the merits of introducing pop-up cycle lanes. But I take Councillor Radford's point that has had a knock-on effect. That has impacted on the free-flowing traffic conditions along West Derby Road and therefore along Millbank as well. That's consequences of having to reallocate the road space to make provision for cyclists. But what I would say is that we have to look at the vehicular traffic that's generated by this particular development. And the question that we ask ourselves is whether or not the traffic levels that are going to be generated, the additional traffic movements on the highway network, are going to be so significant as to cause severe harm. And our view is that it's not. You're talking about literally one extra vehicle every 4 minutes being added onto the highway network. And we don't believe that to be significant in the overall, in terms of the overall volume of traffic that uses that section of road, particularly during the peak times. So, our view firmly is that we don't have any objections to this development. Thanks, Chair.
Very clear, thank you, Andy. And we do have to consider just this application, not the whole issue of the whole of the ward, as everybody who's a planning committee member well knows. So I've got no other people indicating, so I'm going to move now to the vote. So can I move that the recommendation be approved? Is that agreed?
Thank you, Chair. Your vote?
Agreed.
Councillor Kennedy?
Agreed.
Thank you. Councillor Prince?
Agreed.
Thank you. Councillor Dunn?
Radford opposed.
Councillor Sarah Doyle, beg your pardon. Councillor Sarah Doyle? Councillor Billy Marrat? Thank you. Councillor Radford?
Opposed.
Against?
I would have liked to have moved an amendment against, but I wasn't able to dig it, but never mind.
Councillor Juarez?
Against?
Against?
Yes, against.
Chair, that's 4 votes in favour and 2 votes against the application being approved. Thank you. Chair.
Record dissent, please, Chairman.
Dissent. Thank you, Councillor Radford.
I can't comprehend why we have a road being built where we can't get traffic out the road at the moment.
Okay, now,
Chair, your next item of business is item 8, which is Gill and Hitchin Court, Woodlands Road, Liverpool 17.
yes, but I just wanted some clarification. Did we actually get Councillor Doyle in? I don't think we did we?
No, Chair, I didn't have her on the link.
No, okay.
I'm back now. So
Oh, you're back. Okay, Sarah, you're back. We've got to move on to the next item now, Sarah.
No problem.
So we're going on now to agenda item 8, which is Gill and Hitchin Court, Woodlands Road in Liverpool 7. And I have Richard Carmichael as being here to speak to us. Is that correct, Richard?
Yes, that's correct, Chair.
Okay, would you like to take us through your presentation now, please?
Yes, please. Good afternoon, committee. I'm Richard Carmichael. I'm here to speak in favour of the application for the former Gill and Hitchin Court. This application relates to the scheme for the larger regeneration of the former Kelton Convent on Woodlands Road. Our client currently has an existing approval in place to deliver 51 apartments and 198 space children's nursery. The application before you today is to replace the 98 place children's nursery with 12 apartments over 2 buildings with the associated parking, bin and cycle storage. The existing site is currently occupied by a low quality 1990s nursing home, which stands behind a substantial 3.5 metre brick and sandstone wall to Woodlands Road and Elmsley Road. The image in front of you shows the wider Kelton scheme, and the area in question is the top left-hand corner, the 2 floor plans that you can see with a little more detail there. The proposal would be to utilise the existing application entrance on Woodlands Road to service 2 new blocks of 6 apartments. These are 2.5 and 3 stories tall. The development would then include 20 parking spaces to support this area of the scheme and a separate bin and bike storage building supporting 20 bikes being stored. The buildings themselves are designed to be 10 3-bedroom units and 2 1-bedroom units. These are sizable homes ranging from 1,200 to 1,600 square feet, 2 bathrooms, utility room, guest toilets, the higher end of apartment offerings in the area. The vernacular is designed to be a continuation of the approval on the wider scheme. So that's natural slate, brick, sandstone detailing, etc. All designed to be respectful to the listed building setting of the court, the former convent building. With the elevation drawing that you can see in front of you now on the previous slide, if possible, please. You will see the view from Woodlands Road. The buildings subject to this application are the 2 left-hand buildings that you can see. They are a direct replacement for a children's nursery building that is of the same scale and massive in their direct relation to properties on Woodlands Road and Elmswood Road. Interfaces have been very carefully considered by the practice and in consultation with the planning department to make some changes along the way to ensure that interfaces are respectful to all adjacent properties, taking into account our existing boundary features, level differences of over 2 metres, and the existing aesthetic on Woodlands Road. All in all, we're here to answer any further questions you may have regarding this amendment to this section of the scheme. Thank you. Goodbye.
Are there any questions? Okay, well, I'm going to pass over to our case officer now to summarise the issues for us.
Thank you, Chair. You've just had a detailed presentation from the applicant, and there's a detailed report in front of you. As you've heard, the site is currently occupied by a single-storey building that was formerly used as a nursing home. The proposal is for 2 residential blocks of 2.5 and 3 storeys high, containing 12 flats in total. As you've heard, consent was previously granted on the site for a 98-child day nursery, which will be of the same scale as that being proposed for the blocks today. Originally submitted came in as a single block with 12 flats in it, but that's been amended to break up its scale and massing as it was considered to be too dominant in the street scene. And as you saw from the street scene elevation that was provided to you previously, the resultant blocks now are in keeping with the other blocks that have been approved previously in the street scene. Therefore, the scale and design is considered to be appropriate to Woodlands Road and will relate well to the other 2 blocks that have already been approved. The proposal will exceed the off-street parking requirement, providing 20 spaces for the 12 flats proposed, and the number of vehicular movements are considered to be acceptable so as not to impact on the local highway network. Trip generation would be significantly less than the approved 98-space child nursery. In terms of residential amenity, it is considered there are sufficient interface distances to properties on the opposite side of the road, which are normal and characteristic of the area. Property to the northeast at 70 Elmwood Road would have a slightly substandard interface distance, but this is mitigated by a drop in site levels and the existence of a high wall and a tree belt which will screen the proposed development so as not to have any undue impact on that occupier. As such, Chair, we're happy to recommend the scheme for approval, but happy to answer any questions.
Are there any questions? I don't see anybody indicating. So, can I move that the recommendation be approved? Is that agreed?
Thank you, Chair. If I may go through the voting, your vote, Chair.
Agreed.
Thank you. Councillor Kennedy.
Agreed.
Thank you. Councillor Prince.
Agreed.
Councillor Sarah Doyle.
Agreed. Thank you, Pete.
Thank you. Councillor Marrat.
Agreed.
Thank you. Councillor Radford.
Agreed.
Thank you. And Councillor Juarez.
Agreed.
Thank you, Chair. The voting is 7 members in favour, none against, and the recommendation is therefore approved. Thank you. Chair, your next item of business is number 9, which is number 43, Tynwald Hill, Liverpool 13.
On this, we have present Catherine Kavanagh and Steve Reddy. And I think it's Catherine who's going to be taking us through this. Is Catherine ready to come in?
Yeah.
Thank you, Catherine.
Good morning, councillors. I'm Kate Kavanagh. I'm the project manager for the extended project of opening Liverpool's residential homes. And I will be the manager of the proposed residential home. This application is for a change of use from C3 to C2, private dwelling to a small children's home. The council are looking at opening our own children's homes to give children the opportunity to remain within our city. As of last week, we had 1,512 looked after children. 877 of these were aged 5 to 15 and 143 were in residential care, mainly outside of Liverpool. The application is for a small children's home where 4 children will live. They will be both male and female, age 8 to 17. Sorry, can we just go back to the first slide? It's for children to live medium to long-term basis with the view to moving home with family, foster care or semi-independent living. Some children may have social, emotional or behavioural difficulties due to the previous traumatic experiences. Children's homes are one of the most regulated services by Ofsted. We will have regular communication with the Ofsted inspector. There will be 1 to 2 inspections per year and there will be a monthly visit by an independent visitor. The property itself provides large indoor and outdoor space for children. There's parking facilities at the front of the house. We will be looking to add a CCTV for security and some renovations will need to take place to fit in with building regulations. Next slide, please. We've looked at what's on offer for children in the area, such as leisure activities, community clubs and schools. We've also spoken with police, probation and safeguarding colleagues. This is not an area that's identified as a hotspot for exploitation. We've reviewed crime statistics and put together a risk assessment to help safeguard the children. Feedback from the police has led us to review the age criteria for the home, and we've now reduced it to 8 to 17 rather than 10 to 17. The risk assessment will be reviewed as part of ongoing practice, and we refer to the area risk assessment when deciding who lives at the home. The decision of who lives at the home will lie with myself as the manager. I need to be confident that the children's needs will be met by the home itself, and I also need to consider the impact of the children already living in the home and how they will fit together and live together. The matching of children is really important. Before moving in, we will be thoughtful about the children's needs and think about them visiting for tea, meeting staff and other children, as well as giving them information about the area. Children respond well to routines, and this is very much about a structured environment with boundaries and routines in place, as well as rules. Children will be rewarded for their positive behaviour. There will be a multi-agency approach with services wrapped around the children. We will work with social workers, health services, police care home liaison officer, as well as schools. There will be regular reviews to see how things are working for the children living at the home. Next slide, please. Children will be cared for by a staff team consisting of a manager, deputy manager, 11 residential workers, 1 general assistant. A senior manager will oversee this service. Children will be cared for 24 hours a day. Staff will work early shifts, late shifts and night shifts, and there will be 2 to 3 staff on duty each shift. At night, 1 staff member will remain awake throughout the night. The staff team will be experienced and knowledgeable to help meet our children's needs, to help them grow and develop. The children will be well cared for and will be well supervised. The staff team will receive training and will be well supported within their role. When the home managers are not on site, they will be available for on-call support. We want to do the best for these children, and we will always welcome feedback. We will look to resolve complaints in an appropriate manner. We want to build positive relationships with the community. And through this process, we have learned lessons for our future projects, following the feedback from ward councillors and the residents. And final slide. Within our homes, we want our children to be safe and nurtured, have fun and be happy, receive high quality care, have good emotional health, have a voice about their care and their experiences. We want them to attend school and do well, get a job or even go to university, have lots of friends, lots of interests and hobbies. These children haven't had the best starts to life, but this is all about investing in their future. Thank you.
Thank you, Kate. You don't seem to be, Kate, and I did have down Steve Reddy might be here, but I don't see him on the participants.
Yes, Chair, I am. Can you hear me?
Yes, I can. Would you like to speak, Steve?
Thank you, Chair. Just before I speak about the proposal, just should put on record again sincere apologies to the ward councillors. We have learned lessons from this process, and certainly for the ward councillors, Steve, Billy and Joe, we should have spoken to them right from the outset, and it's really regrettable that we didn't, and it's also regrettable that if there was any indication that they had been spoken to, but we are grateful for their feedback and engagement. Since we have started having positive conversations, and we certainly have learned lessons from that. I should also say our new cabinet member for Children's Services, Councillor Hinnigan, Lenny, is on the committee meeting as well, and she and myself have committed to ensure that we learn the lessons from this. So, because of the volume of looked after children in Liverpool and the issues we have accessing quality provision that also represents best value. We now want to open our own children's homes in the city. We have been looking at many properties across the city, well over 40 in the last year. As Kate indicated, we are restricted in terms of by Ofsted guidelines in terms of where we can look and what type of properties. I must say we have spoken to the police several times about the proposal and have been reassured about some of the potential safety issues. We recognise there have been some concerns raised by neighbours, and what I can say is my team and I, and obviously Ofsted, will ensure that the home is managed properly. We hope there are no issues, but sometimes neighbours do have issues, and what I will say is that myself and my team are available. These are our children, and it's right the city provides homes for them, and hope the committee can support the proposal. Thank you.
Steve, and I think it says in our notes that there will be contact details given out to residents. So I had a question from Councillor Joe Dunn, or it might be Steve Radford, if they're on the same email.
Chair, did you wish to take Councillor Hinnigan?
Yes, but I can't see a hand up. But can we have Councillor Dunn's question? It's not for him to speak yet. I'm taking a question at this point. Then I'll bring in Councillor Hinnigan.
It's Steve Radford, Chairman. Can I ask, and I'm not sitting as a member, I'm sitting as a ward councillor on this issue, just for clarity. Steve, you said you've had discussions with Merseyside Police. Would you like to be a bit more revealing about those discussions with Merseyside Police in respect to two issues? Firstly, when we did the consultation after you had already bought the property, we were advised by your children's services members, could we not leaflet Moscow Drive, because Moscow Drive included some two houses where people with a record of child exploitation were resident. And secondly, did the police not share with you that in the case Tynwald Hill itself was safe, but they felt that if any children went missing, they didn't have the resources to support, and that in fact Newsham Park was an area of child exploitation they'd be vulnerable with. And on that backcloth, you might be interested, we've actually even had to sponsor a course on child exploitation with Sports Live in the locality. So I think your comments have been at best misleading over the police feedback about the vulnerability of the locality that is beyond Tynwald Hill. And we've even had a certain predatory gentleman's flat set alight in Lister Drive. So I don't recognise the contribution you made at the committee as reflecting the police contribution.
On that, Steve or Kate, whichever one of you would like to answer.
Yeah, Kate could start. Thanks, Chair.
Yeah, some of the comments that the police made, we can be absolutely clear about them. The police inspector said to us that they did have concerns about the level of criminal activity that some of the children could be exposed to within the area. So from that, we changed our criteria for the age range of children coming in, and then we also reviewed the risk assessment. At no point did the police tell us that, you know, it was an area that children were being exploited. The police inspector also said that Newsham Park was a nice place of a day, but unsafe of a night. He wouldn't recommend that area. Also added that the police were doing really good work with street workers in Shield Road and the top of Newsham Park, which is about half a mile away from the home, and also had no concerns about how the home would be run by ourselves and working as a multi-agency. Missing children is a problem for the police, not just looked after children. The trend at the moment is that there's more missing people going from home, not from care services. So as a home, we will be actively looking for our children should they go missing. And when the home is set up, it really is about the relationships with staff. These are children who have had multiple moves, and we're looking at staff building positive relationships with them, trusting relationships. So we will be on the phone to our children and we will be out looking for them if we don't know where they are.
Does Steve want to come in before I invite Lily in?
It's just on a specific on one of the conversations we had with local residents. There's some suggestions about a few individuals and a particular registered sex offender activity in the area, and that is something we went back to Merseyside Police and asked about that, and we're given some reassurance.
I'm going to invite Councillor Lily Hinnigan in now, who can explain why she's here to the committee. Lily? Peter, I don't seem to have Lily coming in, and she didn't.
Sorry, Trish, can you hear me now?
Yes, yeah.
Sorry, Trish.
Carry on.
Chair, sorry. I just want to support what Steve and Catherine have said, really. But also, I know Steve's apologised to the ward councillors. I want to extend that apology to the residents as well, and I think that's really important. I think, you know, I came into this and the journey was well ahead when I came into it, but we have learned a lot of lessons, and I have to be really clear with members of this committee that the decision to run with it without the consultation was not that of the officers, and I think it's really unfair that the officers, you know, get it in the neck for the non-consultation. I've spoken to Councillor Kushner, you know, he wanted to do it quickly, and we have learnt lessons from it, and that won't happen again. But the residents, I feel like we've listened to the residents. Steve's just said around the stuff with the police. I was really worried when I met with your residents with some of the feedback, and was really clear with our officers that these things need to be looked into. I work with children and young people. I understand the risks daily, but for me, you know, the risk could be greater in that that could have had a HMO, it could have had anything. You know, these are 4 children who will be supervised, who will have lots of support. You know, because we've learned so many lessons from it, you can bet your life we are going to be so reactive to them residents and that community now, more so than ever, because we can't afford to get this wrong. We need our children back in our city. We've got too many out of border placements. You know, these children need to be home where they've got access to, you know, possibly family, where they can get back with families. We've all got responsibilities as corporate parents, and I think it's really important that people support this application, bring these children home, bring them safe. But I give you my word, the councillors and the residents, we are going to be so reactive to this, to the problems, because we're learning lessons, and we will make sure that this works. That's all I can say. Thanks, Chair.
And Lily has taken over from Councillor Kushner, I should explain, as our Cabinet Member for Children's Services, which is why she's came late into the process. Now, we've actually got the hand up of Billy Lake, Councillor Billy Lake, but you're here on my agenda to speak now, Billy, for up to 3 minutes. So would you like to come in and say what you need to say?
Yes, thank you, Chair. I think I'd like to start, and certainly I would speak on behalf of myself and my ward colleagues to say to Linny and to Steve, we do accept your most sincere apologies. You know, they've been really heartfelt, and we do accept that, and we thank you for that. I don't think this is the place now to go back into the lack of consultation. We're way beyond that. What I really do feel here is that it is really quite sad in the end that something as good and worthwhile as a children's home was so badly handled to lead to the extent of hostility and distrust that it has created in the local community. And I think that everybody should look at that and look where the responsibilities lie for that. Not only about the lack of consultation, but also about simple administrative errors that created a picture that something surreptitious was going on. The fact that we as councillors were identified in the original planning details as having been consulted when we hadn't been consulted. And the poor handling just went on, even up until the recent renewal of the applications, where the home was described as being a C2A, which puts a completely different light on it as a category. This was given to be a family home where a small number of children would live as a family. But describing it as a C2A means that in fact it could become a secure unit. That was then admitted to be yet another administration, another typo. But you can see how that would in itself create further distrust. The idea of it being a family home is somewhat, I don't know, how can you have 14 staff members coming and going at all times of the day and night and still try and defend its existence as a family home to people in the surrounding community? It won't be a family home by virtue of all that will be going on around it. And I've got to say, and there's been much talk of this, the police, senior police officers did not recommend this as a site for a children's home. And they know what they're talking about, and they can't be dismissed. That opinion was reiterated to me when I met our local community, excuse me, when I met our local community police officers only last week. It seems as though the police's opinion of all of this is being disregarded. So there's been so many points here that have been badly handled that this whole affair should be taken away and deeply analysed if this city is to go forward with further children's homes. And I'll just leave my comment on this final point. The lack of honesty and openness about all of this has also led to distrust over the purchase price of this property. This property was bought.
I really do need to finish your comments now. You've well over your time.
I'll finish now by advising the committee that this property was bought at many tens of thousands of pounds more than the going rate for any other property in that road. And I've also, I should advise the committee, I've advised Max Collar of that.
That is not true. I think I can assure you, and Roger Mayer might want to come in over that. But in the meantime, Kate would like to come back. So if you'd like to comment, please, Kate.
Thank you, Chair. I just wanted to say, Billy, my apologies if my presentation implied that there would be 14 members of staff on duty each day. That wasn't, sorry, what I was trying to, the message I was trying to get across. I was just trying to say that will be our staff team. Obviously, them staff will work on a rota pattern, and there will be 2 to 3 staff on each shift, but there won't be 14 members of staff in that, you know, building any one day. As the manager, there will be some times that I'm not there and the deputy will be there, you know, at different times and stuff. With regards to the comments about the family home, that is really just trying to give children the stability that they haven't had, trying to educate them like any good parents would, and give them access to opportunities that they haven't had. And also, I am sorry for the, you know, the edits that have been made that have caused concern, and rightly so, with the residents. And just the last point is that with regards to the police, we haven't had any recent information from the police as a service about their concerns, other than that the new inspector for Tubruch is looking forward to having further discussions and working with us moving forward. That's all I can add on that matter.
Right, he's ready to come in, and then Lenny Hennigan. So, Steve.
Thank you, Chair. Just to say the valuation report that was provided around the value of the property and the value of properties that have been sold in the area, what was circulated to ward councillors and some other individuals who'd queried that. So just so you know, we have circulated the valuation report. Thanks.
And Lenny?
Yeah, Tricia, I was just going to say, Billy, during the first meeting with your residents, the first thing I did whilst that meeting was on was Google house prices in that road, because I was alarmed. I'll be honest, I did. I was like, what? You know, that seems an awful lot of money. But straight after that meeting, I carried on the meeting with officers, and I honestly, due diligence was done. I know we'd already bought it, but I was like, like the residents was like, you know, this seems an awful lot of money. I think when you look at it, and any of the members of the committee can do it now, a lot of the house prices that were on it for that road were bought years ago, and it was around the condition of the house. And I've had a big investigation into how the house was bought, the due diligence and everything to make sure that everything was done right, and it was. I'm just giving you that reassurance.
Dr. Dunn is due to speak now, and Joe, you've got up to 3 minutes.
Thank you, Chair. It was interesting to hear all that, and I completely agree with Steve Reddy and Kath and Lily. We do need to bring our children back home. That is an underlying issue. My problem, and I'm sure I share it with Councillor Lake and Councillor Radford, is we are a welcoming community, and we're not against children's homes at any way, shape or form. What I am against is the location in which this is in, and I deeply fear for the children that will be mixing in the local community and will be mixing in that area. There's been reports of drug dealing within that locality. Oh, you can read Liverpool Echo. There's constant news about Nugent Park and antisocial behaviour, and surely that poses a real risk to what I would describe are vulnerable children. They have been through a lot, and I really do not think this area is suitable for it. There's also a probation centre, which is about a 5-minute walk away, and there's sex offenders that regularly attend that. We've spoke about the Moscow Drive. There's registered sex offenders there. So my issue really is the safety of these children and the surroundings in which they're in. And I'd just like to finish. We actually got later this off one of our neighbours, is that the UDP plan, paragraph 12.19, and that suggests that residential care homes should be detached or semi-detached if it's also with the adjoining property. This isn't the case here. This is the council's own guidance. If we look at the new ones that have been put in place, that I believe were previously council care homes, you got Laurel Road. I think that's a detached or it's adjoining. And then we have the one on Older Road. So this seems completely the opposite of what this policy suggests and what the council have previously done.
Yeah. In fact, that issue was addressed in our planning notes, Councillor Dunn, but I'm sure the case officer will deal with that. And in the meantime, I see that you would like to come back in, Kate. So I would ask you to keep it brief.
Yeah, it was just on the point about the children's safety. Obviously, their safety is paramount to us. What we need to consider is that these are children from Liverpool, so they are likely to have been living in similar areas, facing the same levels of crime. And whilst we do not dismiss this level of crime and what's going on, we have put a risk assessment in place around how we are going to reduce these, this to the children and young people. And I'd just like to finish on the sex offenders in any area are a risk to every child. They're not just a risk to the 4 children who are going to live in this home, but we will have multi-agency working and we will have some, dialogue with people that, other residents don't usually have. Thank you.
To summarise the issues on this. Now over to you, John.
Thank you, Chair. Clearly, Chair, you'll see from the you will have heard rather from the speakers that there has been quite a lot of views expressed about this particular application. It's caused some concern in the community, and I think a lot of the issues have been addressed by colleagues within the council who are driving forward this proposal. And I think I would like to try and concentrate specifically on the planning issues. A lot of the issues have been highlighted around the wider background to this application, and particularly the lack of engagement prior to the purchase of the property and the submission of the application. Before I do that, though, Chair, can I just report a couple of late objections that were received yesterday evening? I think they have also been circulated to members of the Planning Committee, but I think just for the sake of completeness, it's worth just me reading it.
Interject on all of these late Planning Committee members. Of course, the officers not coming direct to us. We consider the things that are put in front of us on the day we make our decision. And seeing as I noted that some of the objections mention the word predetermination, that is why I'm coming in here. Yeah. We are in no way predetermined. We consider what's put in front of us at our planning meeting. And these people should not be approaching individual planning committee members.
Absolutely right, Chair, and thank you for that clarification. So I'll read it in full, if I may, Chair. With reference to my email below, I've not received a response from planning as to how this application meets the requirement of the UDP, and I am forwarding to the Planning Committee to ensure that they have all the relevant information ahead of the meeting. The case officer report now acknowledges that supplementary planning guidance SPG 3 indicates that a detached property is most suitable. However, dismisses this as guidance only. The report omits to include that the UDP section 12.9 clearly states that to protect the amenity of residents, a semi-detached property is appropriate for a residential care home where both properties are part of the development. This is not the case for this application. Additionally, section 12.9 is included in the section titled residential care homes. I therefore fail to see how this is not relevant to the application. The report states wherein making any determination under the Planning Act regarded to be had to the development plan, and the determination should be made in accordance with the plan. Conversion of a semi-detached property to a residential care home is not in accordance with the plan. The fact that it is detailed in the UDP acknowledges that a residential care home in a semi-detached property will impact adjoining neighbours. The officer report also includes, based on the management plan submitted, the activity associated with the proposed use would differ little from the associated with a family dwelling house of the same size. Based on the proposed shift patterns, there will be staff coming or going, including weekends at 7 AM, 7:30 AM, 8 AM, 9 AM, 2:30 PM, 3 PM, 4:30 PM, 9:45 PM and 10 PM. Additionally, there will be the comings and goings of 4 residents, their social workers and 4 families, 4 groups of friends, etc. There will also be staff meetings, 14 members of staff, up to twice a month. This could not be considered typical of a 4-bedroom family home and will impact on the amenity of our family and neighbours. Due to the timing of the committee, etc., they won't be able to attend and trust the comments will be considered. So that is the first objection, Chair. The second further objection simply reiterates that, but also makes the point that the communal spaces within the property are on the shared wall between the 2 properties. Chair, I'll try and pick up some of those points as I go through the application. And as I say, I want to focus specifically on the planning issues associated with this, because as you've heard in the presentation, this is a type of proposal that is subject to very stringent management through Ofsted, and there are other regulatory requirements outside of the planning process. So in terms of the application, you'll see that the particular property is a semi-detached. It's quite a substantial semi-detached property on Tynwald Hill. this committee will be aware of Tynwald Hill. It's had a number of applications recently considered by this committee for conversions to flats. And I think that might have contributed to some of the concerns that have been expressed through this application around the perception that this is an area that is being subject to significant change and affecting the stability and the cohesion of the community. So I think your officers acknowledge that. But nonetheless, we still have to consider this particular application as it's before your officers and before you as a planning committee. So in terms of the principle of development, and I think this is where the issue around the particular paragraph that's been referred to by Councillor Dunn and in that further email comes into play. The policy C2 of the UDP is how the application, is the policy that is to be used in the consideration of this application. And that's set out for you in full at paragraph 1.4 of the report. And it says there shall be no adverse impact on the residential character of the area. The property is of appropriate size and type. There is adequate provision of garden amenity space to serve the needs of the residents, and there is adequate provision of car parking, servicing and fire escapes. And subject to those criteria being satisfied, proposals for residential care will be granted. The section that is being referred to by Councillor Dunn and by a number of the residents is a supporting part of the UDP. So it's text that is there to support and provide a narrative to those policies. And I'll read out what paragraph 12.19 says in just a moment when I can find it. Bear with me, Chair. But I think while I'm trying to find it, there we are. Okay. So 12.19 says, to minimise the effect of homes on the amenity of local residents, the conversion of existing buildings to residential care homes are most suited to detached properties or semi-detached houses. So it does include semi-detached houses, albeit it says where both properties are part of the proposed development. So Councillor Dunn is right, and the residents are right, that reference is made in the UDP. However, that is not the policy. That is supporting narrative that helps understand the criteria against which applications are to be judged, but it is not the policy itself. And what it does not say is that properties must be semi-detached or must be detached. It simply says that these types of properties are most suited. And bear in mind that this policy around residential care isn't just for children's care homes, it's all types of residential care homes, so including ones for the elderly and so on. So I think you have to understand the wider context. So your officers have therefore concluded that the principle of a residential care home of the type being proposed is acceptable in this location, having regard to policy C2, specifically those various criteria, and we reflect on those criteria further in the report. In terms of the amenity, which is indeed one of the criteria against which such applications are to be judged, the report takes you through, and you've heard clearly how this is to be managed and the numbers of people and the numbers of staff, and that is all set out in your report. So this is for 4 children with a number of shift patterns throughout the day, and the conclusion that your officers make in relation to this application is, given the scale of it, given the limited number of staff handovers, that the impact on residential amenity will not be significant. You've heard from the applicants again that the whole purpose of these types of operation are to provide a domestic setting, is to provide stability, and obviously that domestic setting is a really important part of this. So your officer's view is that the impact of this is not going to be significantly worse than you might otherwise experience if it were to be used as a normal large family dwelling house. In terms of the other matters, Chair, things like highways, again, they're addressed in the committee report, and suffice to say that your officers are happy that there is sufficient parking associated with the premises to provide for sufficient parking for staff and so on. So for all of those reasons, Chair, your officers have concluded that this is an acceptable form of development within the location that is being proposed and is in accordance with policy. And we have therefore recommended approval subject to the various conditions attached. I am, of course, happy to answer any questions that you or other members may have. Thank you.
Steve Bradford has a question.
I would just like to make a slight comment. If there's a lack of confidence by residents in the planning process that they contacted all committee members, it is a direct consequence of planning misleading them that ward councillors had been consulted over a certificate of lawfulness, misled over the nature of the application. So I think we are not. This is not the first and only application. Committee members have been lobbied by residents, but in this case, residents are well founded to be apprehensive that there have been misled several times by the planning officers' communications. So I'd just like to put that on record. The last thing I would just say, Libby, councillor said about we shouldn't have a go at officers. Well, if your officers are so inept they don't consult ward members, then why do we pay their wages? Your officers have made a decision not to consult with ward councillors, and we're quite right to have a go at them. If your ward member council officers are supposed to be responsible for all the council, not just Labour executive members. So, sorry, we will have a go at them if they're not doing their job properly, and so should you.
I don't need you to tell me how to do my job, thank you, Councillor Radford. I would point out that there were 50 individual neighbour notifications notified on the notes on page 140. So be very clear that consultation did take place. Councillor Hinnigan.
Tricia, thanks for that, Chair. Steve, can I just say, they're not my officers, they're your officers as well. And I'll just like to remind you, there's an officers member protocol that exists. And speaking about officers in public meetings as this is not good, and it's not clever. So I'll just like to remind you of that protocol. We've admitted it was not the officers. I can't be any clearer than that. So I think that's a really unfair. If the officers are in any doubt, not doing what they should be, I guarantee you I will question it. But in a way that's correct, and they deserve the respect. That's all I'm saying.
There don't seem to be any other people indicating on this item now, so I'd like to move to the vote. Shall I move that the recommendation be approved? Is that agreed?
Thank you, Chair. I'll just conduct members through the voting process. Chair, your vote.
Agreed.
Thank you. Councillor Kennedy.
Agreed.
Thank you. Councillor Prince is taking no part, having declared an interest. Councillor Sarah Doyle.
Agreed, thank you.
Thank you. Councillor Billy Marrat.
Agreed.
Thank you. Councillor Steve Radford.
I can't vote because I've declared an interest.
Thank you. Councillor Radford.
That is true, Peter.
Thank you, Councillor
You
Radford.
made it
And
clear.
Councillor Juarez.
Abstaining.
Chair, that's 4 members voting in favour, none against and 1 abstention. The recommendation is approved. Thank you.
Thank you, Peter. And I think you were going to suggest a short break now, weren't you?
Chair, do members wish to just take 5 minutes for a small, short comfort break?
Yes, people are nodding. Yes, please.
Thank you,
Peter.
Chair. Yes.
So would you give them a time to come back, please?
Yes, Chair, if we could come back at 12 noon.
Okay, that's fine. Thank you, everyone. See you again at I think we're waiting on Councillor Kennedy to come back, Peter.
Yes, looks like, Chair. And here he is.
Here he is. So we can restart now, Peter.
Thank you, Chair. Item 10, Chair, which is Hanfield Street, Liverpool 5.
Yeah, and this is one where I hand over to our case officer to do the presentation, and then we've got Councillor Jane Corbett to speak. So the case officer, please.
Chair, I'm happy to speak, but I think it might be better if Councillor Corbett speaks first.
Okay, all right, yeah, that is the usual way. Sorry, John. Councillor Corbett, would you like to come in now, please?
Thank you, Chair. Just to say, I'm objecting on the grounds of the principal development, the siting, the visual impact and design, and residential amenity. If you look at NPPF 13, paragraph 13, it's very clear in the report that it explains that the number of radio and electronic communication masts and the sites for such installations should be kept to a minimum consistent with the needs of consumers and the efficient operation of the masts for future expansion. However, my concern is that this planning application may be led by opportunity rather than any proven demand for 5G by the so-called consumers. And at the height of 15 metres and the wraparound cabinet at the base, as proposed, is far too close to this high-density residential area and right on top of the pedestrian entrance to Thirlmere Park. So as such is totally inappropriate. On siting, it's actually not clear from the report whether any other sites have been considered. And on visual impact and design, UDP policy HD 27 requires that this type of proposal, the effect on the area should be minimised. However, the only mitigation proposed is the height from 20 down to 15 metres and the colour, I think, which is grey. And given that the mast is so close to the houses and the park entrance is not adequate or acceptable.
Catherine,
and in terms of residential amenity, there'll be undue impact on the neighbouring properties due to proximity. So it's really not the right site. It's so close to the terrace streets. If you look at the site map, John, I don't know whether you could show that again. The little streets there are very, very tight. Hanfield Street, Hanfield Place, Stockbridge Street. You can see on where the red is there. And then all those streets, that whole section there is very, very tight, very, very concentrated. And then where you can see the red again, you can see that that's right on that's exactly where the pedestrian entrance to the park is, one of the pedestrian entrances. So I'm just objecting on all of those grounds. Thank you, Chair.
So we had the slides come up before, such as we have. I don't have anybody indicating that they want to speak at this stage, so I will hand over to our case officer now. So over to you, John.
Thank you, Chair. Just before I respond to Councillor Corbett's concerns and take you through the report, can I just report that Councillor Corbett did submit a late representation. I think she's covered the various issues within her written objection, but I'm more than happy to read that out if Councillor Corbett wants me to. Chair, the issue of telecommunications masts is obviously very familiar to you and members of this planning committee, and I'll just try and pick up on the points that Councillor Corbett has raised, both in her objection and in her presentation then. In terms of the principle of development, the justification is clearly set out within your committee report. The application's been assessed against the various policies in the UDP and National Planning Policy Framework. It is usual for applicants to always include within their submissions details of alternative sites that are being considered. So what usually happens is there is a gap in the coverage in certain parts, whether that's for 4G or for 5G, and there is a need to identify locations within a particular cell, and the applicants then provide us information and details about the other sites that were looked at and considered. And obviously that's been done in this particular case, and the conclusion has been reached by the applicants that this is the most appropriate site to provide that coverage. Clearly, Chair, these types of facility, these types of mast and antennae need to be located in areas where there is the highest demand. We have to accept to some extent what the operators tell us in relation to that, but equally there is no evidence that we've got to suggest that they're saying anything other than what's in the application in terms of the need for this particular facility. So in terms of the principle, we're satisfied that it complies with both National Planning Policy Framework and the UDP. In terms of the siting and its visual impact, I think if we can just go back to the slide that shows the elevation drawing, you'll see that this is lower than some of the masts that this committee has considered. So this is a 15 metre, it's a slimline type pole with the mast at the top. And given its overall scale and its location, we're satisfied that it would not have a harmful impact in terms of the wider street scene. It's not significantly higher than the surrounding sort of street furniture, street lights and so on. And so your officers are content that it would not have a harmful visual impact. And then in terms of wider issues such as public health, again, obviously your officers and this committee are fully aware of the concerns that are often expressed about these in terms of the potential harm from non-ionising radiation. But again, provided they have signed a certificate that says it's compliant with the Commission on Non-Ionising Radiation Protection, then there is no further requirement for your officers or this committee to further assess the potential health impacts. That's been done in this case, and so for all of those reasons, Chair, it's been recommended for approval subject to the various conditions. Happy to answer questions.
And we have a question here. Peter, can you advise me who it's from, because the slides are still up?
Councillor Radford, Councillor Radford, Chair, Councillor Marrat and Councillor Doyle.
And then Councillor Doyle and Councillor Marrat. Councillor Radford first.
Chair, having listened to John's contribution, it sounds as if we are taking on trust that they've looked at alternative sites rather than we know it. Well, I'm not convinced by that argument. I mean, actually, I know the vicinity very well because I deliver food hampers to our pensioners who live on Thurmill Road. It is a very tight residential area, and Jane's comments are perfectly accurate. But what bothers me is, don't we within a stone's throw have quite a few community buildings or commercial buildings that could have hosted a mast that would be less visually obstructive and less obstructive on the street pavement? And it does strike to me, and I'm not just talking about this application, we're just always accepting on the faith that the mast companies have done an Ontario. Well, we've not got any evidence for what we do have is a park being obstructed by more street furniture. I mean, I remember the time when Phil Moffat's venue on Shoebrook was hoisted to the courts because he put an A board up advertising his butchers, which wasn't on the main street flow. So we seem to have double standards. We seem to have we penalise some traders for putting out minimal coverage on the street to advertise local shopping areas, and then we have 5G masts being put up wherever they want. I'm not convinced by this. We should trust them. They've done an exploration. I can't see any evidence of it, and therefore I tend to support the objectors.
I will go back to you, John, to answer Councillor Bradford, and then I'll invite Councillor Doyle and Marrat in. John.
Thank you, Chair. I mean, I understand Councillor Bradford's point, and certainly that there is a degree of trust, if you like, between officers and when they're considering this application and the evidence that's submitted by the applicants. But at the same time, we will challenge them. So if it is felt that there are appropriate sites that are in the vicinity, then we will go back to the applicants and suggest alternative sites. Where perhaps that we rely on that element of trust is within the sort of the technical element. It's not necessarily knowing that there might be alternative sites, is whether or not those alternative sites fit with the technical requirements of the particular operators concerned. And so there might be technical reasons why a certain location that is put forward by officers is not appropriate. And that can be because of the way that it's impeded by buildings or trees or whatever. And that's where I think your officers do have to rely to some extent on the advice of the applicants and the telecommunications operators. So I acknowledge the point, but certainly in terms of locational requirements, we will absolutely go back to applicants in appropriate circumstances and try and seek clarification as to why particular sites have been ruled out or why other sites can't be ruled in.
Thank you, John. I'm going to invite Councillor Doyle in now, if she's there.
Yes, thank you,
Yes.
Chair.
Good question, Councillor.
Thank you. Councillor Radford did address the question I was going to pose, and John's answers also addressed what I was seeking clarification on, and it was the point that so we have to trust the company and the proposer of the application on the technical side of it, and I find that very unsettling if we're asking them, you know, we need this information on where is the best technical site for it. Obviously I feel that they might put forward technical answers that suit the details of their application. Thank you.
Okay, and I'll invite Councillor Marrat to speak now.
Thank you, Chair. I'd just like to ask Councillor Corbett, did you get confirmation from the actual company, Jane, of where they plan to put this? Because we did on one on Pinehurst Avenue, and we responded back to the company. I think one of the officers back to our recommendations as well. And there's now well, it's been a long review going on now, but did you get confirmation, Jane, from the actual company that that's where they wanted to site it? Because we did on the one that we opposed.
So just respond to Councillor Marrat. I've had a lot of applications coming in, and so to be fair to the application, to be fair to the company, that would have come in, and I didn't respond at that point. I managed to have a very long conversation over the one on Netherfields Road, which was going to actually block the pavement, and that was and they've reset that somewhere. But this one was one of the ones that slipped through, if you like. But the issue about that is as well that they've in the report it states about the proximity to Brett Road District Centre as if it's just around the corner. It's really not. I mean, you know the area really well, Billy. And my genuine concern is that it's so close to those very, very tight terrace streets, and it's right on top of Thirlmere Park. And as Steve Radford said before, there will be other places that are just literally on the road there that could be looked at. So yes, it's my fault for not getting onto this straight on top of it, but I've got so much coming in as you know, it's really difficult to try and get there in time. But at least I got to this committee, and I know the residents are really upset because I've spoken to them as well. Thanks very much.
Thank you.
So, John, would you like to come back on these points? I think you have said that other sites were investigated in the notes.
Chair, apologies, and it's unfortunate with a lot of these telecommunications applications that this committee considers that the representatives don't see fit to attend these committees and answer the particular questions that the members may have. Suffice to say that your officers do always invite them so that they can address the types of questions that are being asked. Chair, I'm actually trying to find the documentation that I've referred to in terms of this particular application, and unfortunately, due to technical limitations, I'm actually not able to view all of the documents that are available. I've managed to find an ICNIRP certificate, but I'm not able to find the list of alternative sites. I'm not saying that it isn't there, but I just can't view it at the moment. So my apologies for that.
Well, I'd like to move that we defer this item until we can get all the technical details to feed into the committee.
Yeah, absolutely, Chair. And I understand that point. I think what I would simply say, though, is, as you know, and as this committee knows, there is a deemed consent process whereby if these are not determined within a 56-day period or some other period that has been agreed beforehand, then it falls to be granted by default. So a deferral is a possibility, but there is no guarantee that the applicant will agree to the further period. So if members have a concern about this particular application because of issues around the siting and design, and indeed the lack of justification for this particular site, then can I suggest that as an alternative, you simply refuse the application? It is far less risky as an option. So that is what I would suggest to you as a planning committee. Given the concerns that seem to be being expressed by members of the committee and by Councillor Corbett, if you as a chair consider there isn't the sufficient information to justify this site, and similarly you're also concerned about the siting and design of it, then I would suggest you move to refuse the application instead. I'm happy to put forward a suggested reason for refusal if that helps.
I'm just thinking though, John, we have got a planning committee in 3 weeks. Would that take us outside of the period then?
Very possibly, Chair. What tends to happen is, because of the period for consultation that's required and because of the sort of administrative processes behind these applications, plus obviously the challenges around COVID at the moment in the way that we're working, most of these applications will go beyond the 56 days. And where we know that it's going to a particular planning committee, we will normally seek an extension of time to coincide with a couple of days after that meeting. So by and large, most extensions of time will be 2 or 3 days after the scheduled planning committee date, just to allow for those administrative processes on the assumption that it will be granted by the committee. So it's very possible, I don't know without checking, Chair, but it's very possible that the timescale that's been agreed between the parties here will be similar and will only be in a couple of days' time. So again, I'm sure it's possible, you know, that we can get approval from the applicants, but there's no guarantee of that, and obviously they're not here either, unfortunately, to give that undertaking or agreeing a further extension of time. So given that risk, Chair, as I say, I would go, I would look to possibly refuse this instead.
Well, I'd like some advice from our legal department, please, on this, Roger Mann, because my understanding is if we refuse, it just gets overturned on appeal, but the council then incurs a cost. So I think Roger's present, aren't you, Roger?
Sorry, Chair. Yes, well, it is open to committee to refuse, but there is a risk involving costs. But I think the approach John suggested is the most sensible one. If we did defer, could well end up with just deemed consent in any event, which I'm sure wouldn't be something the committee would want to see.
No, that's not what we want, of course. All right, well, I'm going to move that we refuse this application. So I'd like to move to the vote, please, Peter.
Chair, can I just perhaps suggest 2 reasons for refusal for you?
Yes, please.
For this meeting and for the minutes, and to make one other observation. The normal protocol here is that obviously applications which are refused against officer recommendation are reported back to a further meeting of the committee. That's clearly not going to be possible in these particular circumstances. So I think you also need to give us a authority to issue the decision without referral. So that's one part of your recommendation, Chair. And then the 2 reasons for refusal that I would suggest are that the proposed siting design of the telecommunications mast will be harmful to the visual amenity of the area, contrary to policies. Where are they? Contrary to policies. I do beg your pardon, Chair. It's whichever ones are relevant to. I think it's HD 27. Yeah. Yeah. Thank you. Thank you, whoever helped me out there. And then I think the second reason for refusal is the applicant has not provided sufficient information to demonstrate the suitability of alternative sites in the immediate vicinity.
So have you got that form of words, Peter, now?
Didn't quite catch the second policy, Chair. I can get that from my colleague.
Well, we'll clarify that as part of the minutes, if that's all right, Chair.
Would you like me to conduct the vote, Chair?
Yes, please.
You have moved a refusal, rather, along the lines outlined by your colleague, the planning officer. Your vote, Chair?
Agree to the refusal.
Councillor Kennedy?
Agreed.
Councillor Prince?
Agree to the refusal.
Councillor Sarah Doyle?
Agree to the refusal.
Councillor Marrat?
Agree to the refusal.
Councillor Radford?
Agree to the refusal.
Councillor Juarez?
Agree to refuse.
Chair, that application has been refused. 7 members voting in favour and none against, which takes you to the next item, a business item 11, relating to Crete and Candia House at Jason Street, Liverpool 5.
And on this one, we've got Catherine Besant, who wanted to speak. She was coming in by telephone, so I hope she's somewhere out there. If you'd like to come in, Catherine, you've got up to 3 minutes. I can hear you.
Okay. Yeah, I'm speaking on behalf of Everton residents. 183 signatures of residents objecting to the application on Crete Towers were handed into the planning officer on the 19th of January. Masts are located on Netherfield Road, Kirkdale Road, Great Holmes Street, outside Amsterdam High School and Jennifer Avenue. Since 2020, the telecommunications have been putting up bigger and bigger masts on Candia Towers. Having lived in different housing in this street since the age of 6, this is the first ever planning application we have been able to object to. This unfortunately has happened to many residents here. These masts are getting bigger and more elaborate. It's highly concerning that the over the saturation in one condensed area of 3G, 4G to add even more by the way of 5G, and 6 and 7G is already being mentioned for the future. If the planning for Crete Towers goes ahead, then even more will be added on than just the mentioned applications. As is noted by the masts I have sent pictures of on Candia Towers and Crete Towers. The telecommunications have been here again the past few weeks with no planning permission needed. So residents who are already suffering from the 2020 changes, that they're now to be even bigger and more masts and dishes on Candia Towers. The residents in Joshua Close are at eye level to both of these towers and step outside their front and back garden doors to these masts or see them directly from their windows. Some residents are also concerned about their future health. It is not helpful to mental well-being having something so visible and aesthetically unpleasing to the eye. So for nearly 3 months, they added worry and stress on top of everything else that has been happening in the world. We would hope that our concerns are heard and this application is not allowed to blight the local residents' daily life. I would also like to just say a report come out yesterday by Dr. Porteous. It's a 176 page on radiation. He's an expert, and it's by the WHO, and it's saying IARC has prioritised a new review to be conducted by 2024. Yes. And by the way, concerning the application, it was only put in on the 22nd of December, so it was really hard to get those objections. Thank you. Can you still hear me?
Are there any questions? Are there any questions?
Am I allowed to speak, Chair?
Yeah.
Councillor Corbett, you wanted to speak, did you say?
Yes, please.
Yes, go on.
Catherine and the residents, I've met the residents, and and what's concerning again is that the telecommunications organisation, I don't think is here again today. They're aware of the real concern in the area, and it's been well documented. In terms of the concentration on that block, and on those 2 blocks. They're the 2 blocks. If you know Everton, they're down by Everton Valley. So they're just as you come round that corner, you go along Netherfield Road, and at the bottom there's 2. They used to be the old student blocks after they were residential blocks. The difference about the area though there is that you've got very, very steep streets just the other side of Netherfield Road. So actually, when you go up the hill, you're almost on the level of the top of those 2 blocks there. I used to live in Milburn Heights, and you could see our kitchen window. We were on the 14th floor from the top hill as you were coming over. So you've got the steepest streets in Liverpool are opposite there. You've then got these 2 blocks, and sadly, as you would have seen in the Echo, someone jumping from there the other day, or anyway, dying. But you've got an additional, so what you'll have is 12 new antennae and 2 dishes. So it's growing and growing, as Catherine's explained. Now, in terms of the planning framework, what there's meant to be is some way of being able to mask all of that, and so that you actually don't see it. And so instead of people coming out of their front door already having 2 tower blocks right in front of them and overpowering them, you've also got these masts right at the top, and it's not good enough for the telecommunications people to say, well, you don't really see it because at the top of the block. No, you do. You do, and the landfall in that area of Everton, as I said, is very, very steep. So they haven't even tried to look at how they can mitigate that visual amenity issue for the residents there. They also, in that report, again, they actually specifically said they didn't look at other sites. Now, my understanding is that they don't have to if you're using an existing site, but surely to goodness they should show how the need for it, given, as Catherine has just said, the high concentration already of masts in that area. And my worry is that they're using the top of those 2 tower blocks. We haven't got that many tower blocks left in Everton. Those 2 tower blocks as actually a concentrated, because they're sharing it between all of the different mobile providers as well. And it's too much in too small an area of Everton. And again, I would have expected them to be at the planning committee to explain it, but it looks like we're just being railroaded, and I'm really not happy with this at all. Thanks very much.
Thank you, Councillor Corbett. Are there any questions about either of those 2 speakers before I pass on to our case officer? No. So can I ask our case officer to summarise the issues on this now and speak about the presentation, if there is any?
Yeah, thank you again, Chair. And again, Councillor Corbett, her comments related to the previous application, and I think this application as well. I'm happy to summarise those again, but I think Councillor Corbett has largely addressed the points that are contained therein. Chair, in relation to this particular application, it is slightly different from the one that you've just considered in that this is utilising an existing building where there are already a number of telecommunications masts and associated equipment. The National Planning Policy Framework actually encourages mass sharing. So this is the type of location that actually the operators need to be considering when they're looking at identifying sites within a particular area. So they're encouraged first to look at mass sharing and only then to look at other individual sites. And obviously this is always the challenge, that if we don't have a mass sharing, then the alternative in terms of providing the coverage for that particular cell then has to go back to a ground-based solution, and again, it's not always possible for technical reasons, like I alluded to in the previous application, to provide that coverage. So this provides an opportunity to provide the coverage for the particular operator in this area. It's in accordance with National Planning Policy guidance insofar as it's using an existing building and sharing on existing masts. I think Councillor Corbett, the resident rather, referred to some works that have already taken place there. My understanding is that was investigated by your officers, or certainly followed up by your officers, and my understanding is that the actual works that was being undertaken there was entirely permitted development. So again, not every application for telecommunications equipment requires planning permission or indeed prior approval. It can be straight permitted development. So for example, changing from one type of antenna to another does not need any kind of approval from the local planning authority. In this particular case, again, if we can perhaps just have a quick look at the slides, you'll see from there that there is existing equipment on there, and then there's this further proposed equipment. Your officer's view is that given the height of the building, given the presence of the existing equipment, it might be better if we can just toggle between those two. So that's existing, and then we've got a proposed. So you can see the slight differences there. Your officer's view is that siting of that equipment in terms of its visual impact would not be harmful to the wider visual amenity. So in terms of siting and design, your officers are comfortable that this would not have a harmful impact. Clearly, again, Chair, that's a matter of subjective judgment, and you are perfectly entitled as a planning committee to come to a different view. But I think this is very, very different to the one that you've just considered previously, given its location on top of a building. The only other point I would make, Chair, is in relation again to the sort of public health concerns that have been raised. And again, the Speaker spoke about a report that had been done. You as a planning committee, us as officers, have to consider applications against planning policy and against the National Planning Policy Framework. So irrespective of that, perhaps further evidence or other evidence that's outside about the potential impacts of 5G and other telecommunications technology, we have to consider it against the planning advice, and that's what we've done in this report, and that's what you as a planning committee will need to do in considering an application. So again, they've signed an ICNIRP certificate. We're satisfied with that, and the potential health impacts should not need to be considered further. Happy to answer questions, Chair.
Yes, so this health impact and new evidence is outside of our remit, in fact. I think it's fair to say, and that as long as they have the certificate, we don't have the power to say that the Commission for Non-Ionising Radiation is wrong, because they have done a lot of research. I have looked into it. I can see that Councillor Kennedy is indicating, and as a member of the Planning Committee, I'm going to take his question. I'll come back to Councillor Corbett. Councillor Kennedy. I think you need to unmute. That's it, Malcolm. I can hear you now.
A question for John. And are you saying to us that if the company were actually willing to consider other sites which were not on the building, they would have to have a number of ground-based, and therefore have to be, the masts themselves have to be built higher, spread around the area. Is that what effectively you've been saying to us?
In essence, Councillor Kennedy, yes. Telecommunications on top of large buildings like this tend to provide a much greater coverage, and if they're not to be provided there, and we are to accept that there is a deficiency in the coverage in a particular area, then obviously they need to provide alternative equipment, and obviously that will usually be in terms of street furniture type equipment. Again, I can't speak in terms of the wider sort of technical impacts, but the principle of going to ground based is absolutely right. Yeah.
Okay. Now I have to point out, Jane, that we did, invite you to speak. It is unusual for us to take questions that are not given by members of the planning committee, but I will permit you to come in here with your question.
Thank you, Chair. The question is around the visual impact and design. So UDP policy HG 27 explains that any proposal should be designed. Should be designed, landscaped and screened to minimise its effect on the appearance and amenity of its surroundings. But there is actually no such mitigation at all within this proposal. And given the steepness of the streets on the other side as well, that is very clear.
John, can you come in about that? But I don't know what the rules are about screening when we've already got the antennae and dishes on the buildings.
I can't dispute what's said in the policy. What's said in the policy is as Councillor Corbett set out there. Clearly, each application is to be judged on its own particular merits. I think given where it is on top of the building, these types of structure aren't unusual. Again, a lot of structures can be done without any kind of planning permission anyway, including this sort of prior approval type process. So it's against that sort of background that these applications are to be assessed by us as officers and ultimately by you as a planning committee. The impact in terms of visual amenity is, as I said earlier, one of subjective judgment. If you as a planning committee feel that the particular proposal before you now is harmful to visual amenity, then clearly it is within your gift to refuse it for those reasons. But as I say, and as is set out in the report, your officer's view is very much that given where it is, it's an appropriate location and would not have a significant impact, in terms of that wider visual amenity.
Yes, and that's quite clear from the notes, John. Yeah. Thank you. So are there any other questions or comments from planning committee members? Okay, so I'm going to move to the vote. So can I move that the recommendation be approved? Is that agreed?
Chair, your vote?
Agreed.
Councillor Kennedy?
Agreed.
Councillor Prince?
Agreed.
Councillor Doyle?
Agreed.
Thank you. Councillor Marrat?
Agreed.
Councillor Steve Radford? Councillor Radford? I don't think Councillor Radford's on the call currently. Councillor Juarez?
Agreed.
Thank you. Chair, that's 6 members voting in favour and none against to allow the application. Thank you. Chair, your next application is item 12, the corner of Mill Street and Park Street, Liverpool 8.
Catherine Bazanti
is now exiting.
Right, sorry, I just thought we let the announcement go. So I have Richard Byrne who wishes to address the committee. Richard, would you like to come in now, please?
Yes, please. Okay. So, hello, I'm Richard Byrne and I will be presenting to committee today a planning application to erect a 4-storey building plus basement comprising a reformer, Pilates, yoga and bar studio within use Class E to the corner of Milk Street and Park Street in Liverpool L8. Next slide, please. Slide 2 provides an overview of the site, highlighting the corner location of the proposed development that is currently vacant and which formerly had a building to its location in 2009 that has since been demolished. The site is adjacent to Park Palace Ponies and opposite the NHS Health Centre. The proposed use of the building is that of a wellness centre, comprising a number of uses within the health and lifestyle sector, including yoga, reformer Pilates and ballet. This commercial use we consider to be appropriate for the land, and the generally short period of stay for visitors would complement existing businesses in situ when compared to, for example, a residential use, which would usually be considered with bringing with it more amenity considerations given the permanence of people who would use that space. Next slide, please. So starting with the ground floor, this provides a reception and open welcome area with lift access to service hall floors. There would be a bin store internal to ensure that there would not be any implications to the connectivity or accessibility of the street. There is level access throughout the building, ensuring that all spaces are accessible to all users who may wish to use them. The basement is substantially smaller in footprint when compared to the built structure above ground, so as to ensure its feasibility from a construction and operational perspective. The basement itself will provide treatment and changing facilities. The first and second floors would provide open plan studio space, as would the third floor, which is again smaller in footprint and set back from the main elevation fronting Mill Street and Park Street to ensure coordination with the existing built environment. The studio spaces, while being open plan, would also comprise reformer Pilates equipment, which in itself is a substantial investment to the provision of service that this development hopes to provide to the community. If we could just move on to the next slide, please. As you can see from the proposed elevations, the resultant building will be 4 stories above ground. So that's ground, first, second, and the setback third floor. There would be brick built blank facade elevations to the rear and side that front onto the Park Palace building and its operations. This would ensure the interaction between the uses and introduction of this development before you today would not lead to friction, and the design of the building has been respectful to the unique nature of the locality and its community, including Park Palace Ponies. The omission of such windows and replacement with translucent materials to the fronting elevations to Park Street and Mill Street have been intended as hybrid in the sense that this would ensure that existing levels of amenity for business in situ is retained, while also ensuring that natural light can reach the studios and provide privacy to the users. Final slide, please. So finally, at the heart of the proposed development has been its design, and I really wanted to just end on this slide because it takes into consideration what's been at the heart of the development from the start, which is considering the end users of the proposal as well as those existing businesses that are recognised as an asset to the community by this proposed development. It is within this perspective that the proposed development has its own interests aligned with the continued prosperity and operation of Park Palace Ponies in particular. From a planning perspective, the proposal brings back into use a vacant piece of land in a prominent location to a corner plot. The proposal in front of you today is wholly appropriate for the land. It's in the health and wellness sector, which I think is really positive. It's acceptable to local and national policies on all levels. But I just wanted to end on this slide today, really, in recognition of the concerns that local councillors have raised. And to bring the presentation to a conclusion, I just want to ensure members that the proposed development aims to be as much of an asset to the community as the Park Palace Ponies operation. This is reflected in the design concept, particularly the blank elevations, which means that, and translucent materials, which means that we haven't had to include any windows. So really, you know, we recognise and hope to have some mutual appreciation with the local business and the wider community. So thank you for your time this morning. Thanks for listening, and I'd be happy to invite any questions which members or local councillors may have for me.
Thank you, Richard. Are there any questions for Richard? Well, at the moment, I don't see anybody indicating, unless you can, Peter. Sarah Doyle, who wishes to address the committee and thereby won't be voting on this item. Sarah, would you like to come in?
Yes, thank you, Chair, and thank you, Richard, for his presentation. I think Richard has summed up some of the concerns that the councillors had, and we are happy to see that it would be a business joining Mill Street. It is an area where we want to have more local business and more opportunity, and we are happy that it is a part of the health and wellbeing sector as well. We echoed our concerns to the planning department about ongoing support to Park Palace Ponies. It is a very important community organisation that does a lot of work with local children and local families. So if the appliers of the application can commit to supporting Park Palace Ponies, then we are happy with that.
Yeah, if I'll just go back to that if you want me to, Chair.
Yes, please, Richard, if you would answer Councillor Doyle.
Yeah, I mean, I'm the agent acting on behalf of the applicants, and I mean, from the start, all the conversations we've had and the design concept that went into planning went through like a number of revisions, and part of that was acknowledging the unique community of the locality, and I think really, you know, it's in the interests, and this has come back from the applicant through me, is it's in the interests of themselves that, you know, there is prosperity and coordination between all the stakeholders. Obviously Park Palace Ponies is at the centre of that, and I mean, it as much presents an opportunity and a possibility for coordination. You know, maybe there could be an opportunity where somebody, you know, a parent drops one of the kids off at the Park Palace Ponies and maybe wants to do a studio class while they wait. And I think it's really important that that opportunity is there and it's a possibility. And in terms of the future operation of Park Palace Ponies, I think, you know, there'll be neighbours. So, you know, really, I don't know what more I can say other than just to try and reinforce to you that there is a commitment there from the applicants, and hopefully it's reflected in how we've designed the scheme that just proves to you that it's more than just words. It's actually, you know, at the heart of the scheme.
Can I just come in there, Chair? Yes, thank you very much for that, Richard, and that's it. No problem. Thank you very much for that, Richard. That's exactly the type of collaboration that we want to see from local businesses coming into the area. So thank you very much for your response.
Yeah.
So thank you, Councillor Doyle. I think you're happy with that. And I don't see anybody else indicating. So I'm going to hand over to the case officer to comment on the presentation and summarise the issues on the application. Over to you, Stuart.
Thank you, Chair. You've just had a detailed presentation from the agent who's gone through it in pretty much done half my job for me. But I'll go through the report for you, Chair. As you've seen from these slides, the vacant site is adjacent to Park Ponies residential dwellings in the vicinity. The area is characterised by mixed heights, with the adjacent building being of a similar height to that being proposed. It's for a yoga Pilates studio, which is considered to be an acceptable use in this location, where there are a mix of uses, including residential, Palace Ponies operation, and car repair garages. The main concerns raised have revolved around the operation of ponies and parking, which you've heard from Councillor Doyle. The proposal will be accessed from Mill Street and Park Street corner with a blank facade to the outdoor element of Palace Ponies. As you've heard from the agent, this was specifically designed in so that the interactions between the two uses can satisfactorily carry on without either giving rise to any disturbance to the other. The application has been considered as well by the Head of Environmental Health Services, who again, having regard to the agent of change side of things, is satisfied that the two uses can happily coexist without affecting each other through the design and the uses. As of Briars, the scale is considered to be appropriate, having regard to other nearby buildings, and the design is simple but modern, which is considered to be acceptable given the variety of architectural forms in the area. It will not represent an overbearing structure in the street scene, and its design will use translucent cladding, which will mean there's no overlooking to any nearby residential properties. As we've heard, the concerns raised about potential complaints about smells, etc. from the stables, that's been dealt with the two uses. We're happy and coexist together without cause for concern. Access to the external pony area will remain unchanged. It's not considered there will be any unacceptable impact on the operation of Palace Ponies. In terms of parking, the scheme has been carefully considered by the Head of Highways and Transportation, who considers that any trip generation will be very limited and is appropriate to a residential area. He considers that there's sufficient on-street parking availability that will be able to accommodate the proposed use. As such, therefore, Chair, we're happy to recommend approval for the proposal, but could I just advise that we'd like to suggest 2 additional conditions. One is that we get details of the gates to be submitted, which is going to secure the boundaries to the site. So we'd like to impose that. And we'd also like to restrict the use to what's being proposed, which is a Pilates yoga studio within use class E. The reason for that, Chair, is that use class E has got a wide range of uses now, which includes restaurants, shops, and clearly, if it went to that, the trip generation from traffic might be significantly different. So we'd just like to retain controls in the event that that was proposed. We're just seeking to restrict the use class within Class E. And other than that, Chair, we're happy to recommend approval. We're happy to answer any questions.
Well, I can see that Richard Byrne, you're nodding about what our case officer has said about the use class. So you're agreeable. This is Pilates and yoga relaxation.
Yeah, that's what we've applied for as well. Yeah.
That's great. So, are there any questions on this application? Okay, so I'm going to move to the vote then. Can I move that the recommendation with the additional conditions that our case officer has indicated be approved? Is that agreed?
Thank you, Chair. Your vote?
Agreed.
Thank you. Councillor Kennedy?
Agreed.
Councillor Prince?
Agreed.
Councillor Doyle has declared an interest and taken no part. Councillor Marrat?
Agreed.
Councillor Radford? May not be on the call still. And Councillor Juarez?
Agreed.
Thank you. Chair, that's 5 members voting in favour, none against. The recommendation is to approve the application. That's agreed. Chair,
thank you, Peter.
Your final application today, item 13, 510 Mather Avenue and upper floor of 62 Heath Road.
Thank you. And we've had somebody who's been very patient waiting. That is Mr. Robert Graham, who's the architect. So if you'd like to put the presentation to committee now, please.
What do I say? There you are. You just talk them through it.
Well, just talk us through it. That would be great. Thank you.
Yes. Well, it's an existing building in Mather Avenue and Heath Road on the corner. I think it was a bank, but I'm not sure. It was certainly commercial, and it's been empty for quite a while. It's in a very nice residential area. I think it'd make an ideal restaurant. My client, the person that's taking it, is very good with restaurants. He's well used to running them. I think it would be a success if approved. He's taken, as well as the 510 Mather, he's taken 62 adjacent, which helped us with our means of escape from the first floor, insofar as distance is concerned, as we created a mezzanine in the 510, which is one big open space. It has a little yard, that's the plan of it, yes, that's the plan on the ground floor. The entrance is the old existing bank entrance. The windows are beautifully curved ones, which shows on the elevation. We've managed to cover everything we've been asked for by planners and the building surveyors. It's opened back onto an alleyway, which goes into a 3 metre further alleyway, which was full of rubbish when we moved into it, but has been cleaned up now. And that's where the bin and rubbish would be taken from. Now, that area hatched in red on that is an area where they would store anything within the building rather than put it out into the entry if it was of that type of refuse. I think that's about it. I think there have been some comments locally, but I think in the main, a lot of people that have passed have thought that it would be a good idea when we were surveying it. I've nothing. I'll answer any questions now, and that's it, really. Okay.
Well, I'm not expressing an interest because I haven't participated in any discussions. I've left that to my ward colleagues. But I would say to you, we do get complaints about a lot of rubbish that gets windswept in and dumped into that alley. So personally, I think it would be great if we have a user there who's going to take responsibility for putting the bins out, because I think that'll improve the situation.
I agree.
Yeah, dereliction is a problem on that parade at the moment. Now, I haven't got anybody actually indicating with questions, but I would ask Councillor Juarez, does she want to say anything? I know there's something in our notes from you, but if you wanted to say anything additionally, you're welcome to do so.
Yes, Chair. I just want to say that as a Allerton and Hunts Cross councillor, I do get a lot of complaints regarding the parade, you know, from residents saying to me, you know, can you do something about that eyesore? You know, it's becoming worse. You know, some of those properties have been empty for over 20 years. So I think the applicant has worked really, really hard, and I think that it will regenerate that part of Mather Avenue where residents are crying out for, you know, residential amenities, and this would be a bonus for people that they can, you know, go out and celebrate with their families to have a nice meal. I think it's a plus for the area, and as I say, you know, it's just been derelict for too long, and I think this application is a positive move for the area.
Thank you, Councillor Juarez. So I'd like to invite our case officer now to comment on the presentation and summarise the issues for us. Stuart. You're muted, Stuart. Would you like to unmute?
Sorry, Chair. As you saw on the image that was on the screen just before the site plan, the site's a former bank within a local parade at the corner of Mather Avenue and Heath Road. The proposed use is for a bar restaurant, which has generated a mixture of support and objections from residents. Bars and restaurants are considered to be acceptable in primarily residential areas, subject to there being no unacceptable impacts on amenity or highway safety. The hours proposed would be 11 p.m, which is in keeping with other late night uses in the parade, and the use also fronts the Mather Avenue Heath Road junction, which is a major light controlled junction, which experiences high levels of activity, being a dual carriageway, with the nearest residential property being located some 35 metres away. Flue is considered to be in an acceptable location and design, and no objections have been made from environmental health in relation to odours or fumes associated with such. Given the hours are consistent with existing uses in the parade and that there is existing activity around this junction, it's considered that any additional activity associated with the premises will be acceptable and will bring a vacant building back into positive use. The minor external alterations, inserting windows in the front elevation and a single-storey extension to the rear, will not have any detrimental impact on the amenity of any nearby residents. In relation to highways matters, the application has been carefully considered by the head of highways and transportation. We consider the majority of trips to be local and footborne, or by using other methods of transport such as buses and taxis. He accepts that there is no off-street parking immediately outside, but this is consistent with other uses within the parade, and there was also a lay-by on Mather Avenue in close proximity to the application site. Concerns have been raised that there is an outdoor seating area proposed, but given that any external seating area would be located on the adopted footpath, such a use or facility would be covered by a highways licence outside of the planning process. So in light of that, Chair, we're happy that this is a welcome use in a local parade, and we're happy to recommend approval, but happy to answer any questions.
Are there any questions? I can't see anybody indicating, so thank you, Stuart, and thank you to our guest, the architect, Mr. Graham. Can I move that the recommendation be approved? Is that agreed?
Thank you, Chair. And the voting, yourself, Chair?
Agreed.
Councillor Kennedy?
Agreed.
Councillor Prince?
Agreed.
Councillor Doyle?
Agreed, thank you.
Thank you. Councillor Marrat?
No.
Thank you. I don't think Councillor Radford is on the call. And Councillor Juarez, you have an interest, I understand you will be taking part in the vote.
Well, I thought I could take part in the vote.
You got what your vote is then?
Agree.
Agree. Chair, the voting is 6 members in favour and none against to approve the application. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Peter, and thank you everybody who's attended today. That concludes our meeting, and hopefully we will be seeing each other again in 3 weeks. Thank you, everyone.